What happens if you sleep in a bed under lava? What if you translate the enchanted table language? And this is every Minecraft myth tested to see if it's fact or fiction. Starting with, what happens if you grow a sapling at build height? Now, if I hit my F3, you're gonna see that this sapling that we place right here is going to be right at the building height for 319. I can't even place it there. So what would happen if we bone meal it? And as you can see from the super fast setup, the best hope that we have of trying to grow a tree up this high would be growing it at block level 314. Even going just one block higher to 315, no luck. And while in the past we've showed off that an old oak sapling used to be able to grow to the old world build height of 256 as just one singular log, with the new build height, it just doesn't work that way. So, myth busted. Next we're going to be testing the myth that sprint jumping is always faster than the speed potion effects. So, let's give this a shot. We're using trap gates here, so then it'll close as soon as the redstone signal is gone from the wooden pressure plate. Now let's see if I was sprint jumping. That got me just barely further. Let's see if I were to add in speed 2, which again, barely further. And now what if I'm using speed 2 plus jumping? That gets me less far. But the truth is that sprint jumping with speed 2 is just slower than running normally with speed 2. And for that case, myth busted. So this next myth says that you can use a riptide trident to go inside of a waterlogged cauldron and shoot yourself up. And as much as I'm pressing right click, nothing is ever going to happen within the boundaries of this cauldron, because the water inside of a cauldron is only good for cooling you off. And we won't be getting our riptide effect unless we have something waterlogged, which is dumb to me, because if I were to take a chest here and waterlog it, then I could use that 1 pixel of water and still waterlog myself with a riptide. Meaning cauldrons are always stupid. This one says that the new mob, the zombie nautilus, doesn't need water to breathe, which, as we can see, doesn't look quite true, but as soon as I move it outside of our skylight, it is actually the case that these can survive on land. And then if we give them armor like so, they'll actually survive in the sunlight as well, as Observer showed off. But the regular nautilus, that would suffocate outside of water. Sorry, little guy. This myth says you can't jump crit with a spear. Well, let's find out. I'm going to, and that only gave me 1 heart there. And you're seeing no critical hit marks are actually coming off when I use the spear. That's because the spears just don't work that way. And also true here is that you cannot sprint hit to get any extra knockback. That myth's confirmed. This myth says that leaves will burn faster than oak logs. I take a flint and steel here and I disable the fire tick, put one there, and then enable it. Let's see. Whoa! And as you can very clearly see, even though we've still got logs here left to see, our leaves have completely been swallowed to the flame. So, that myth's confirmed. This one says that you're able to bone meal a grass block from any side face of the block. Well, let's find out. And sure enough, that is the case. And if you want an example of how this works, you could always just have a dispenser pointing into this, and it would work with its bone meal every single time. This myth says that baby chickens are small enough to fit inside of a hopper. As we can very clearly see, if we summon it inside with this trapdoor over top, it might look a little stuck, but it does in fact let the chicken go inside of the hopper. And that's because the baby chicken's hitbox is actually a lot smaller than you might think. And if I break this hopper, you'll see exactly so. Even though its head's pretty big, its body is only the bit that is the hitbox. So this myth says that the blocks that you have around a trial spawner determine what can spawn inside of it. Will I get a skeleton instead of the silverfish? Well, unfortunately for me, it's still silverfish, because it's just predetermined by what the spawner is there, and the blocks just help you know what you're gonna get. This myth says that the text on the sign doesn't actually connect to the actual sign texture. It floats a little bit off. Sure enough, there is a little pixel of blue that's hovering off of that. And in fact, there's actually characters that you can add to the sign that make it big enough where it extends past the sign's texture. And the reason that it floats a little bit off like so is that we don't get Z fighting with the textures where it would look out of place. This myth says that a door will save you under lava the same way it would save us underwater. I'm not excited about jumping into a lava lake, but let's find out. And sure enough, it will create an air bubble, but navigating to that air bubble is so difficult, and navigation within the lava pit is so much slower that this really isn't practical. And in that case, I'm just placing the blocks for me to stand on, stopping myself from reaching the bottom. So could it? Maybe, but I'm gonna give this one a partial confirm. This myth says that lava will stop you from sleeping in a bed. Can I right click on this bed and sleep just fine? Not only can I sleep just fine, but in fact, I'm not even burning alive. And I wake up just fine. So good luck trying to make a trap for your bed like this. this. If anything, it's just a magic trick. This myth says that you can find ruined portals inside of any overworld biome, which is mostly true, including cave biomes, except for the deep dark. Which makes sense, right? It would kind of ruin the aesthetic if you're seeing one of these down inside of the ancient cities. But how cool would it look if we got different versions of them that were biome dependent? This myth says that if we were to translate the language that we're seeing inside of the enchantment table, then you could actually find out what enchantments you were gonna get. By the looks of it, I really can't tell. But if I were to go and take a resource pack that translates the standard galactic language into something I can actually read, Fire Limited Shry is Efficiency 1, Beast Jordan is Fortune 1, and Unbreaking 3 is the Humanoid Li. But truth is that they don't actually have any correspondence to what I'm gonna get. But considering that we could occasionally see things that might seem to line up, like seeing mentions of fire or ignite when you're getting something like fire aspect, you might believe it to be the case, but it really is just all gibberish. This myth says that you're able to get Thorns 3 from an enchantment table, but unfortunately, the truth is that we can only get Thorns 2 from enchantment tables regularly, and then Thorns 3 would have to come from treasure loot or by combining two different Thorns 2 books together. Think of it the same way that we can only get Efficiency 5 by combining two Efficiency 4 things. Considering it's only a level 3, I think a lot of people don't even know that this exists. This myth says that mobs from a spawner can spawn on any block, including air. Oh, there we go. You can see that skeletons spawn midair, just as long as they're within proximity to the spawner. And this is true for normal blocks that mobs can't spawn on, like air, transparent blocks like glass slabs, or even water, which is the reason that we can get our mob farms to work that way. This myth says that campfires are less efficient than furnaces. Well, let's see. We're gonna take these same pork chops and test them out in each. And I believe if we tick freeze, we can actually get an even more precise test. So if I take my pork chops and put them in here with the coal, and then I also lay out 4 pork chops like so, we're gonna see how long it takes for both of them to cook through 4 pork chops. Well, the furnace is off to an early lead with 1 cooked pork chop there, but considering that a campfire can hold up to 4 items at the same time and it will finish all of them within 30 seconds, then it'll be able to finish even faster. There we go. And the only way that the furnace would be faster here is if we were using a smoker. But for this case, that myth's busted. This myth says that the higher that you go through a portal, whether you're going through on the floor level like so, or stepping up a block, depends on which portal you'll go to. So if I make this portal higher in the world, as you can see, we're next to the bedrock ceiling, this should increase our chances of not going down to a cave. Sure enough. But this change is actually so minuscule and so odd with how nether portals can work that the difference between you going through a cave or not could literally just be placing a block up like so and going in 1 block higher through the nether portal. Which, credit to Frizz Clips for showing that off. This myth says that it's possible to mine nether gold ore using a wooden pickaxe. It'll definitely feel weird. It's not like our regular gold ore. And while it might take a while, truthfully, it does work. I mean, I guess we're not getting full ingots out of this, but that does still feel very strange. But I think the reason that it's like this is so that Mojang can explain that if you only got Crimson Stem tools, you'd be able to find your way back through the barter system. You can use a Crimson Fungus to prevent Hoglins from despawning. We've got our Hoglin here, which, if I were to feed it a Crimson Fungus, normally when it converts over into a Zoglin over here in the overworld, it would deload as soon as I leave the chunks. Now, because we fed it, it's treated differently and almost more akin to how we can save our zombie villagers by trading with them first as regular villagers. You can use a fire resistance potion to let you see under lava. Well, let's see. I'm just gonna go under lava first, and then if I drink this, I get a very slight increase to my vision. But that increase is gonna let me find all of this ancient debris down here, which is actually good because going down into lava is one of the easier ways to find ancient debris, just as long as you don't run out of your fire resistance potion. The next myth is that piglins attack copper golems when they open up their chests. So right now, this piglin wouldn't attack me, but I don't see the copper golem wearing any kind of gold, and it's completely fine. And just to prove that this is a chest that would kill me if I opened it, I'll go and open this up here. Even if I'm wearing gold, because it has the tag on it, the piglin will attack me. So our copper golems are just fine. But because they can't loot chests, that would be regular chests like that down inside of the bastion, you can't use this as any kind of covert espionage. It's more of a distraction, if anything. I got my dolphins here, and if I give them raw salmon, are they able to go lead us towards any kind of buried treasure? Well, I mean, it's pretty obvious that there's some kind of treasure here. So let me see. So I go down here, I feed speed up the dolphin, and now I can follow it towards where it's going. So we're gonna get a kind of buried treasure. Anything fancy? Oh, so there we go. It took us to an underwater ruin. Got it. So the dolphin will take you either to the nearest ruin or shipwreck. But the ruin doesn't exactly have my buried treasure. Excuse me, cod. This is why you're getting fed to be turned into dolphin food. But no buried treasure map. So does it lead you to buried treasure? I mean, it's buried. Whether it's treasure, it depends on how much you like wheat, I guess. Slime blocks save you from a fall. Do slimes actually take fall damage? Well, as you can see there, pretty clearly they do. But what's interesting about this, and what might be the reason for this myth, is that if we did the exact same test as Observer was telling me with magma cubes, here we go, magma cubes, because they scale, don't take fall damage. So they do a lot better, but you know, maybe it's for the best we're not bouncing off of magma blocks. I don't feel like that would be the most comfortable landing. Excuse me. No fall damage doesn't mean you need to go damage me with your fall. So the reason that this difference happens is because slimes will always jump one block regardless of size, so it's not exactly important that they would be able to survive that kind of fall. But magma cubes, their jump height scales with the magma cube size. Otherwise, you'd just see a bunch of magma cubes shattering into bits in the basalt deltas. It wouldn't make sense. Does wearing a mob head make you invisible to mobs? Well, let's find out. Oh, look at Observer. I guess we're both a little dry. If I'm wearing this and I go into survival, am I invisible to the skeleton versus normal detection range? Well, as we can see right there, the answer is clearly yes, from a certain distance. Let's look at the asterisk on screen, because as I start to get closer, eventually it will actually find me. Wearing the mob head of the correct mob does lower their detection range. And as Observer lets me know, holy smokes. All right, so it takes it down by half by wearing this. You know, if you want to blend into the next family reunion, I guess. Is it possible to make golems with redstone? Sort of, because you can automatically place a pumpkin. It's actually one of the only blocks you can auto place with a dispenser. And then that carved pumpkin gives us the iron golem. But consider we're not able to auto place any of those other blocks. You can auto finish a golem. Can you auto make one? Not necessarily. If you were to name tag a creaking, does that prevent it from despawning? Let's get it to nighttime. That gets us our creaking. So if I take down my name tag, and of course, my favorite thing to do a name tag is naming it something that makes it upside down. Will our upside down creaking stay in the day? I mean, he's upside down, so you know, maybe the time sensitivity is a little different too. So we take that, set it to day. Does it despawn? It doesn't. What? I didn't know that. So if I break the heart, it's still connected to the heart. I'm gonna get Monster Hunter. That's so shocking to me that it stays during the day. Let's see normal behavior with that, right? So if I were to get my creaking heart down and then I set it to day, yeah, I don't even come around quick enough to see it. So it used to work where they would despawn in the day when they had a name tag during the snapshots, but that was changed based on player feedback. Hey, look at that, a point for player feedback. How tall are villagers? Are they the same height as the player? Well, as we can very clearly see by the fact that I can exit this door and he cannot, even though visually, if I go and stand next to this villager, we look to be just about the same height. You know, maybe put me back to back. If I stand on my tippy toes, I might be a little taller. Here, let's get a no AI villager for me to stand next to. How about that? So here's our no AI villager. It actually is a little bit taller than me. And if we check the hitboxes, that's all going to be confirmed. There you go. Villagers are taller than players. A player is what, 1.8 blocks tall? And they're exactly 2 blocks tall? Look at that, exactly 2 blocks. Will villagers despawn if you get far enough away? Well, unlike other mobs that we're used to, like hostile mobs, villagers are called persistent mobs. So if I were to step away from this, only the zombie villager is going to disappear and the regular villager will persist, which makes sense, right? You wouldn't want your villagers just all of a sudden disappearing entirely from your village. And in fact, if something like that does happen, it's more likely that one of your villagers died off or there was something like a lightning storm that turned them into witches. So if I stepped away from this, do we have our mobs despawning? Sure enough, we got our regular villager there, but our zombie villager, no more. Yeah, sorry about your brother. Do villagers need beds? Well, we got a villager. He seems to like his bed. I wouldn't have guessed pink for you with the eye patch. The truth is that villagers will still trade even without needing a bed. So if I go and trade with him and then I break his bed, he's still fine. It all depends on this workstation block. So you can always work, they're just not gonna sleep. The reason that you would want beds for villagers is two-pronged. One is that you need it for villager breeding, and in fact, every open bed is gonna be another villager that they can breed for. And also, they need beds to establish what a quote-unquote village is to then make iron farms. Farmer villagers cannot farm wheat, they only farm bread. Let's see if that's true. Now, this is a villager that we summoned with its inventory already filled up, so it's not able to pick up anything else. And believe if we got a tick sprint going, we'll be able to see what's happening here. So there we go, working along in the crop farm. Not looking very busy. All right, so it's definitely breaking the wheat, putting some of the stuff down into a composter, but do we see in here that we're getting wheat? So yes, we are getting wheat. So why is that the case? If you had an auto farmer or villager breeder, and you're wondering why you're only getting bread, the reason is that when they go to give it to other villagers, it's always gonna be in the bread form because it's a food item as opposed to the raw thing of wheat. Are creepers silent? Let's test this myth. So I've got a creeper here, right? It's definitely moving around a bunch. The cats definitely make sound, but can I hear anything from the creeper? Let's listen closely. Sure enough, there are very subtle footstep sounds that come from the creeper. But while there are footstep sounds, the creeper itself isn't making any noise. And the only time where it will make noise is if I get in survival and it blows me up. Ooh, okay, well, cats won't make any noise anymore either. Is it possible for a charged creeper to be completely invisible? What we're testing here is that some mobs retain parts of their model when invisible. Think of it like wearing armor while you're invisible. So, is this the case with a charged creeper? Because a regular creeper, that's gonna go fully invisible. That's expected behavior. But if I get into creeper, make it lightning, and then invisit, sure enough, both of those creepers that I have there, you're gonna always see their lightning cloud. Now, let's keep these charged creepers because I got another thing that I want to test. If we were to increase the creeper's power up to charged creeper status, is it possible for it to blow up other blocks? All right, we can test this with a flint and steel, so luckily I don't have to go into survival. So long! The answer is no. But what about something a little lighter, like filled with reinforced deep slate? Still no. The reason for this myth existing actually I think probably comes from the fact there is a point where you can't explode these two different blocks. You just need to use commands. Do Elder Guardians constantly give you mining fatigue? The reason for this myth might be a little bit weird. So if I were to go into survival like so, not only am I gonna get shot at by these guys, but after about any time in around a minute, I will receive the effect from the Elder Guardian. Because in Java Edition, they do give you the mining fatigue effect once every minute. They reset the cycle, and so if you're wondering why you could drink the milk and then be fine, only to get it yet again, that's why. There we go. So if you wanted to build a trap where you were giving off a bunch of Elder Guardian mining fatigue, then just by having more Elder Guardians, they all work on a different system. So you could basically make the effect non-stop. You would just need more Elder Guardians. Do lower altitudes mean higher spawns? Now, if you've seen people build really high efficiency mob farms, you're probably seeing them dig some kind of perimeter or hole like this to then have all of their mobs spawn lower in the world. Does it have anything to do with the altitude? Not necessarily. What it really has something to do with is the amount of blocks that Minecraft's spawning algorithm has to check for. So think of it like this. If I'm into this chunk over here, there's all of the different layers that I'm flying through. Each one of these, Minecraft's got to check if there could be something that could potentially spawn in this area. And if you're thinking of all the caves and stuff that we have around, even if those are lit up, it's just going to slow it down. For this example, we have two platforms that are almost entirely identical, except the one on the left is perfect spawning conditions, no blocks above it, and the one on the right, if we zoom all the way up, has an absolute copy so that every block that you're seeing here in the red is actually covered with a block all the way up at build height. So already, look at the difference that we're seeing here. All of this filled up so much faster than the one on the right. So just by having even just another set of blocks, it throws off the spawning algorithm that much. When we do a test like this, it's ultimately clear that lower altitude does help with spawning rates. So if you want to build your mob farm, build it down below. Sea turtles have to breed on the beach. Well, let's find that out. So I can take my turtles all the way over here and get them breeding. That's not so much the issue. It doesn't really have to be a beach. The thing that you're going to notice though is that they always want to go back to where they were born, and at that home location, if there's sand, start planting down their eggs. So usually, because we're seeing a lot of turtles spawn on the beach, that's why this happens that way. There we go. So now that the block is sand, we're definitely not in a beach. It finally goes. So this next myth that we're testing is, do you need to sleep fully through the night to get rid of phantoms? As much as I'm gonna hate it, we're gonna set it tonight, summon our phantoms. The truth is just even touching my head to a pillow is enough to get me rid of insomnia. So now I no longer have the insomnia tag. Unfortunately, the phantoms are still here. So just having a bed that you're right-clicking every now and then, that's more than enough. Granted, you'll still lose your spawn point that way, so it's not a perfect solution. So our next myth, poison works like regeneration for the undead. So let's get a damaged undead, even a little bit more damage. Now, the reason that this this might exist is because if I take a splash potion of healing, that'll kill him, but a splash potion of harming heals him up. If I were to get my weakened husk here and I give it poison, does that regen it? So he's not taking poison damage, but he's also not taking any health back either. He's still weak. Dies in only 2 punches. Our next myth is that all zombies are able to break down doors. But let's summon some natural husks here. As you can see, none of these are up for the task. And in fact, it's only up to 10% that can do it. And this will scale with regional difficulty. So the longer you're in an area, the more likely it is for zombies to become door breakers. But even then, it's still only 1 out of every 10. And it's only on hard difficulty where they can actually succeed in breaking down the door. The rest of the time, they're just gonna go and make a bunch of noise. There we go. Oh, sorry, villager. Worth noting too is that even if they have something in their hand, it doesn't make them mine through the door faster, even if they have an axe. Drowned, much like their husks or zombie counterparts, are hostile mobs. Well, we could test that actually. This one's a little bit confusing, because during the day, they're not throwing anything at me. And in fact, they won't up until the point where I step into water, and then I've made them angry. So if you're going for a swim and you're wondering why they're coming after you during the day, it's because you touched water first. So at this point, they're neutral. So now, if I were to get the drowned and it's nighttime, they will attack me under all circumstances. So they are technically classified as a neutral mob, but at night, they're functionally hostile, and during the day, they're functionally territorial. Wither skeletons cannot shoot bows. Well, we got a wither skeleton, we gave it a bow with commands. Will it shoot me? Not only does it shoot me, but there's an unexpected behavior where they shoot out fire arrows. So it makes you wonder if there's at some point it actually coded in for wither skeletons to have bows. That's not a bow that's enchanted with flame. That's just it shooting as if it was a flame bow. So wither skeletons, although you won't see this in the base game, will definitely shoot you with bows and arrows if given the chance. Does the same thing happen with a crossbow? Well, there we go. Just changed it out in the command block. We've now got our crossbow wither skeleton. No, it doesn't work with a crossbow. So only a regular bow, which makes me think that it is a piece of holdover code. Maybe at some point they were supposed to shoot us. This myth is that you can't one-shot a wither past its half-health armor. So the idea is that the fight is broken up into 2 phases, almost like a Pokemon raid boss. You can't go and one-shot it completely past its shield. Let's test that out. All right. Oh, shoot. I guess I gotta attempt to smash. Let's give that a shot. Oh, yeah. So as we know, with overkill, it's entirely possible to kill the wither in one shot. Piglins can open up doors. Let's find that out. All right, we got our piglin. I'm gonna leave it be. And sure enough, they can open up doors, which is fascinating to me because there's no doors that summon anywhere near piglins anyway. They're not gonna find any of these by natural generation. There's no piglin village structures. So maybe one was planned at one point. So obviously, if we were to bring a piglin into the overworld, it'll zombify. And I've got my piglin with a crossbow. So can zombified piglins use crossbows? Let's see if it loses that part of the brain that can pull the trigger finger. Zombified piglin, sure enough. Will it actually shoot at me? Well, gauged by the fact that it's running towards me, I think we could say that this myth is debunked. It is not possible to get shot at by a zombified piglin, just not in their code. Which for a mindless zombie, I think that makes sense. Oh yeah, they don't even know how to do the doors. Here, if I get myself down, oh, but they do know that they turtle eggs, sorry buddy. But if I were to place down a set of doors, go into survival, I'm completely fine. I mean, I'm a little trapped, but I am completely safe. Oh, they break them down though. Oh no, this is gonna be a rude awakening here, observer. Next section, next section. That actually ties in with this next myth that we're testing, which is that do zombified piglins stay angry at you after you die? Okay, hey fellas. Good to see PigCon still going on. All right, I'm definitely been killed off. They're definitely angry at me then. Are they still angry at me? I'm completely fine. You can't even tell the difference. I look just like them. Striders will die if they're outside of lava. As we can very clearly see from our friend over here, he does get cold, but will he die? Well, given normal causes, he won't. But as Observer's gonna show off with the weather command, the reason this might have happened to your overworld Strider, and the reason that it happened to mine Futon in the July series, was that rain can actually kill these off after long enough. So if it goes and dies in the rain, or if it wanders into some kind of thing of water, it will die off just the same. If I have a set of water there, it will still die off in that way. But just by the simple fact of being outside of lava, that myth is debunked. You can't disable blaze spawners. Let's see if that's true. If I go into survival, we're gonna get a good taste here. We have a bunch of light here. A little too much. I can't even get up to where that place is. So a normal spawner, you would just do the standard place down the 4 torches on the outside. The way that this works here is that there actually is an amount of light level that'll disable the blazes. It's just really, really high. You need a light level of over 11 to get get them to stop spawning, whereas normal mob spawners require a light level of 0. So if you wonder why some blaze farms have it where they pour a bucket of lava over the top, that's why. It's given off enough light level where it's disabling the whole thing. The Ender Dragon fireballs that it spits out are completely random, meaning we can't predict the frequency of how often they're going to shoot out. But as we're going to show off, that actually isn't the case. If we were to get the Ender Dragon down here, it has a high likelihood of spewing out a fireball anytime that an end crystal's broken. Pow! So it's not a completely random behavior, and in fact, it's going to spew out usually to try to dispel that behavior of breaking off the end crystals. I mean, if that was my only life source, I wouldn't be exactly happy with anyone taking them out either. So if you want to avoid the dragon's breath damage consistently, just move after you break a crystal. This myth is that shulkers are completely invincible when they're closed up. So if I were to get close to our shulkers, are they taking absolutely 0 damage? The truth is that they'll take decreased damage, but they are still taking damage in such a way where it is possible to kill a closed shulker. It's just gonna waste a lot of your sword's durability or your arrows. You can see by the amount of hearts that are coming off, it definitely takes more when it's open, but it's still possible to kill it when it's closed. So this myth is that Endermen do not immediately aggro when you look at them. So let's see, this is kind of like looking a gift horse in the mouth. I gotta prepare myself here. Hey! So, sure enough, it does immediately aggro, but it doesn't work in such a way where it's gonna immediately come after me. And in fact, locking my eyes behind this Enderman, I can keep it in place and not have it actually attack me. The way that it works is that you have to hover over their eyes for a quarter of a second. So if I just like quickly graze past, I mean, that's right on its eye level and I'm completely fine. It's when I start to go slower, then it's gonna be an issue. So if you're just surveying an area, you're probably gonna be fine. I mean, especially if you got the void button, then you're really safe. Well, not safe all the time, apparently. Ghasts are capable of spawning in the air. I love the target design for this ghast. That's awesome. So is it possible for a ghast to spawn in the middle of the air? Well, they certainly fly around a lot, so you're probably seeing them in the air. So here's our spawning platform. And then I believe if I go fly away, and if I go into spectator, so there we go. That ghast spawns, but it only spawns first on the block. And it's really noticeable because all their tentacles are gonna go clip through the blocks. There we go. So yeah, it doesn't even matter the light level. This is getting a little nightmarish. We probably gotta move on to the next section. Is it possible to convert gas into happy gas? Oh, well, we're gonna try by drowning this ghast. If you add water, will it become happy? Well, it seems kind of passive right now, but that's because there's no me to attack. The answer is there is no way to convert your gas into happy ghast. We're gonna make it a dearly departed ghast. Well, there's no way to convert your ghast to a happy ghast. It's not like if you go bathe your happy ghast in lava, it'll turn back into an angry ghast. It probably doesn't like you, but it won't be an angry ghast by definition. So this myth is that cave spiders will always poison you. I mean, otherwise, why would you have a cave spider versus regular spider, right? The truth is that on lower difficulties, all they will do is actually melee attack. So here we've got a cave spider on easy difficulty. I'm completely fine. I mean, not completely fine. I am still getting attacked by a cave spider. There's different amounts of poison on different difficulties too. If we go up to normal, then it lasts for 7 seconds and causes 6 damage or 3 hearts. And if we go up to hard, then it lasts for 15 seconds and causes 12 points of damage or 6 hearts. This myth is that if you're finding silverfish, that must mean that there's a stronghold nearby. Well, I'm gonna test my luck. You know, this doesn't feel all that lucky. And the truth is that it's really not lucky because silverfish can actually generate in situations outside of where a stronghold is. So silverfish are able to spawn in mountains, windswept hills, igloo basements, all as an addition to the environment. It feels more like subtraction, honestly. I'm not thrilled about any of this. Unfortunately, it does not mean that there's a stronghold nearby. Passive mobs are finite. So all the passive mobs that generated when you loaded up your world in the first place, they will never spawn in anymore if you kill them all off. Well, let's see. We got our passive pig right here. The truth is that passive mobs like this pig can actually respawn. It's just gonna be slow. And the way that this would happen is that you would need things like open grass blocks, a lot of time to pass, and you have to make sure that the passive mob cap isn't getting filled up by other mobs. So I remember a story vividly in July series where I wanted to generate more mushrooms in the mushroom fields biome post-generation. And the way that we had to do that is that we had to kill off all of my mobs that were in the spawn chunks because those were filling up the passive mob cap. And then eventually, if we loaded it correctly, we were able to get the mushrooms to spawn over there. So I typed in this command to log my mob caps. I hit tab. And then if you zoom in at that second fraction right there, 186 out of 10. So 10 is the mob cap of passive mobs. And then 186 is how many are currently loaded. I would have to get it down to 177 just to have the chance to then load a new mob. So that's why you're not seeing people go and make passive mob farms very often. If you have chickens attached to a lead, then you can actually hold on to these to stop yourself from any kind of fall damage. Well, let's give that a test. A bunch of chickens on leads. It's not the most, but it should be enough. Fantastic. There's my bridge. It was a pleasure knowing you, observer. Make sure I don't drop any chickens before I need to go and jump off. And see ya! Well, for one, my leads break, but that's also not a feature of the game, despite what TikToks might get you to believe. Goats are able to drop mutton. Well, let's find out. Oh, hey, dinner bone. Well, I got a bone to pick with you, and it's what we're having for dinner. Well, no matter how many times that I kill off that goat, it's never gonna drop mutton. So, the reason that this myth might still exist is because at one point, it actually was a feature of the game. I didn't even know this, but back in the Bedrock Edition experimentals for the caves and cliffs, you could kill off a goat, and it would drop mutton. Now, that's not the case in either version nowadays. So, this myth is that you're able to tame your foxes and your axolotls. Surely enough, I can grab this axolotl and oops, apparently also ruin my set. Now that I've grabbed it, it should be quote unquote tamed. And if I give sweet berries to this, I can get the love hearts from my fox like so. But the truth is that they don't work off the same taming mechanics that we're used to from other things. You might have noticed that an axolotl will help you out if you're in combat with a bunch of elder guardians, but that has nothing to do with the fact that I bucketed the axolotl. That's just actually a behavior of any axolotl. If I'm helping them out, they just will help me. They'll get rid of mining fatigue, they'll give me regen, stuff like that. That's just a behavior of axolotls. Anyway, the reason you're seeing it like this is because usually you would bucket it to bring it over to the Guardian Temple in the first place. So if we got our foxes and I were to give it some berries, if I were to then go and breed two foxes together, the baby that's a result will get the trusted tag, but it's not tamed. It's not in the same way as a regular wolf would be. It's just not going to be afraid of you. So there we go. It is confusing though, because they do follow the adults that are fleeing from you. So they basically have that same behavior. Stranger dangers ingrained, I guess. So this myth is that you can instantly tame a horse if you give it an enchanted golden apple. Well, let's see. I got my enchanted golden apple. I shift click it. Is it instantly tamed? Not at all. While certain items are definitely better, it's not like it's that much better. I still had to give it 9 enchanted golden apples just to get it like this. Don't waste your enchanted golden apples on this. You're literally better off if you just put it towards a thing banner pattern. If I were to get a regular and give it regular golden apples, still very expensive, might I add. Just the same, I gave it 10. It is the fastest way to tame them. You're getting no benefit from the enchanted one over the regular one. Certain horse breeds are a faster speed. Let's see. Whoa! Opa! All right, we got all these horses and I could go ride as many of them as I want, but the truth is that the color of the horse has no impact on how fast they go, which I think is kind of nice. If you want any horse that you want in a specific color, you could get it fast. It'll just take a lot of breeding. Bees most commonly spawn in flower forests. Well, the truth is that this actually, not only is it false, but flower forests are some of the lowest spawn rate biomes for bees. The highest spawn rate for bees is going to be in the meadows, which does look fairly similar to a flower forest, so you're forgiven on that one. However, the trees they find here are pretty rare. 5% in all of the plains, mangrove swamps, and cherry groves will have bees on the trees, and it's only 2% in flower forests. That is better for the regular forest, as it ends up being 0.2% in regular forest, birch forest, and old growth birch forests. Here's our flower forest, and can we find any bees? Oh, there's one right over here, but I don't even think this is in the flower forest area. Oh, it still is. The reason this misconception might happen is because the only way to get a sapling to grow and grow with a bee nest is by having it within 2 blocks of a flower. Obviously, there's a lot of flowers in a flower forest. Even then, it's a lower chance than if you were to bone meal the sapling yourself. That being a 5% chance as compared to the 2% chance that we're seeing here. Spiders will attack bees. Well, let's see. Yeah, I don't think they signed any kind of peace treaty. I think this is just actually spiders will never attack bees. And now if it's turned to night, still no difference. So the truth is that if your bees are disappearing, it's more likely that they lost their home on accident, because bees will continue to wander away further and further from the bee nest. Spiders cannot climb magma blocks. Well, let's see. We got our setup and we aggro the spider. Will it climb up the magma blocks? Sure enough. It's not even taking damage from it. Now, the reason this myth exists is because this is a Bedrock Edition only feature. So in that version, the spiders can't climb magma blocks. But for those of us on Java, it's not a way to keep you or your villagers safe in this case. The next myth we're testing says that a spider can climb the world border. Well, we can't place any blocks off the world border, so that would be a little weird. There we go. If I get my spider in, and if I get up here, go into survival, is it able to climb up towards me? Sure enough, a spider is able to climb the world border, which is such a weird sight. Look at that go. I can't place any blocks off of this. I can't shoot any arrows through it, but for some reason the spider can climb up it. Oh, that is weird. Observers pointing out that they can walk through it just fine, but they still climb it like a block? That's a very weird behavior. Pillager banners will make pillager patrols more likely to spawn. Well, we got one placed down here, and I can tell you already that placing a pillager banner has no impact on the spawn rates. So even if you're, as observers showing off, even if you're flying the enemy colors, that's not exactly convincing any more of them to spawn, which is unfortunate. That would actually be kind of a cool mechanic, but all it does is just lowers your property value and frame rate. As you might have seen, witches can actually generate during a raid, and if I get the Bad Omen 5 effect, we'll probably see some here. But while that is true, will they attack the villagers? Let's find out. All right, we got a witch from this part of the raid. Let's see how it goes and helps out the rest of the raid. So as you can see, it does give down things like regeneration potions, but does it attack our villagers? Well, we could even test this out by just placing down a villager next to it. Even though our pillagers are gonna go after it and the witches would go after us, the witches do not actually do anything to our villagers. Despite how scared, look at this guy, he's sweating. Yeah, the witch will be very confused. So even though it's counted towards the raid, it doesn't exactly help out to finish the raid, which I guess that makes sense. It's a healer main. So we can trap a witch with our villager, and despite their differences, they're completely fine. Bats are able to spawn the warden. Now, that's something I've always been worried about when I see one of these bats going and flying around the skulk shriekers. It's definitely intimidating, but the truth is that even though they're able to make it play a sound and that they can activate the different skulk sensors, it actually does not tap into our 3-strike system. If we brought down a whole bunch of other mobs, if I brought down things like villagers and pigs and everything, they'll definitely trigger our skulk sensors, but the skulk shrieker is only triggering based off of player vibrations. But the reason that this myth might exist is because the warden will attack some of these mobs, including bats. So as we can see by these sound waves that are given off by the bats, the warden actually will aggro on the bats, but the shriekers, not so much. We're going into an actual ancient city for this one, since this myth says that it's impossible to spawn multiple wardens at the same time, which if you think of it like a boss mob, that would make sense. As we're gonna see by me getting a little too crazy here with these skulk shriekers, is that there's actually no limit to how many wardens we can get to spawn here. The only limit is that there's no other wardens within a 24 block radius. But if you're running the length of this ancient city, 24 blocks is not that much of a limitation. There's also some amount of time that has to pass because of a cooldown on the shriekers. So it's not gonna be spawning wardens all the time. Be extra careful. Just because there's one warden chasing after you does not mean that there's not gonna be another one right after it. What would happen if we have a warden and get it to do the sonic boom against an enderman? Well, we'll see. It's definitely getting angry like it's gonna hit it, but does it count as a projectile or does it count as some other kind of thing? Oh, here we go. And it does! Look at that! This next myth is that you can use a charged creeper to get a wither skeleton skull. Now, a charged creeper exploding is how you get other player heads. So let's see. Will this explode to get this guy? All right, so I take my flint and steel, I light off the guy, step back, and look at that. 100% chance of getting yourself a wither skeleton skull. That myth is confirmed. So normally with a creeper, we can place a block in between us to negate all the damage. This myth says that when you place a block between you and a charged creeper, it'll explode like a normal creeper. Well, let's see. So, light it off, place a block. Oh, I mean, just by the looks of that, yes. But I just closed that gate and I was completely safe. Let's try that again. Without the gate, sure enough. So just by having a block there, or even just something as simple as a trap door gate that you're flipping, I was completely fine. Only half a heart from a charged creeper. That's insane. All right, myth confirmed. When a skeleton kills a creeper and it drops a disc, that creeper has a chance of dropping every single music disc. We'll get our setup here. We got the skeleton shooting the snow golem, and then if we just put a creeper in there to die, it'll drop a lot of the discs, but is it going to drop all of the ones that we can see? Now, if we go into the discs here, I think what we could very well say is that this isn't possible, because obviously some of these music discs, this needs to happen from killing a ghast, and this needs to happen from killing a chicken jockey, so that at least rolls out those two. And then disc 5 can only come from the disc fragments found in ancient cities, pig step from the bastion remnants, and relic is going to come from the trail ruins. We got a lot of music discs, but not all of them. So myth busted. This one says that we can ride a regular ghast using a boat. Let me see. If I go and take a boat and then ride it into place, will I land on top of the ghast? Hey, sure enough. So because they stack like different entities, I can technically ride this ghast. Now, what I'd be curious to see see, since this is a no AI ghast, is what if I were to take a real ghast and tick freeze and then do it that way? Whoa, careful, it's slippery. And now, tick unfreeze. Oh, it does not move with the ghast. So you can ride on top of it, you just can't ride very far. So myth true, but myth not as true as we would hope it to be. This one says that if you were to have the blindness potion, then there's no way to stop the creaking. Now, obviously, normally, if I had a creaking here, I would just look at it and stop it this way. But if I drink this Suspicious 2 to get blindness, does that still count against the creaking? Well, it's not moving right now, at least as far as I can tell, and my blindness is already gone. So, by the looks of it, it will stop even if I have the blindness effect. Yep, sure enough, the blindness works. Even if I step out of the blindness range, it does work. It doesn't check at all for the potion effects. And for the sake of testing, we could also try this with darkness. Even though that just gives me a different way that it renders on the client side, it doesn't actually change my behavior with the creaking. If I take a carved pumpkin and I put this on, oh, look at that. So the carved pumpkin does stop the interaction. The myth that we have here is that shulkers will take more damage from a pickaxe than from a sword. Well, we can see this by the amount of hearts that they list over their head. So that was 2 there, but about 5 there for my sword. Obviously, they take more damage from the sword than they do the pickaxe, which is a shame. I think that would be a fun way to justify using your pickaxe as a weapon. So a common thing I've heard before is that husks are able to drop sand when you kill them. Well, we got a lot of husks here. Let's see if they drop any sand for us. The truth is that no matter how many of these husks I'm killing, no sand from that one. The only thing that you're gonna find in a husk's loot table is the same stuff that you would find from a zombies. There's no difference. But this myth might exist because in a lot of different packs that you play on, including Skyblock, it is coded so that you could kill husks to get a renewable form of sand. But that's not in the base game. Even with Observer's super looting sword, not a single bit of sand here. Myth busted. Destroying a pillager outpost prevents mobs from spawning. So let's see if we get rid of all of this pillager outpost, if you wouldn't mind helping me out with some TNT here, Observer. Will that stop any of these pillagers from spawning around it? That should be good. Certainly got rid of the pillagers that were near it. So we'll get rid of all the pillagers that are currently here, and then if we speed through time, we'll be able to see if any more spawn. And as you can surely see, they keep spawning in the outskirts around. So it's not necessarily to do with the pillager outpost itself, but to do with the area that's defined around the pillager outpost. So, myth busted. This myth says that pillagers can't wear armor. We got a pillager here that doesn't have armor set into its inventory, and this command block sets up a pillager that's wearing full netherite. So let's see, how long would it take for me to kill each one? So this is the no armor one. 1, 2, 3. And here's our one wearing netherite armor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 hits. So the armor definitely works, and we could even see as much if we were to give some kind of thorns. You would actually see that it works properly. Myth busted. So what we're testing here is that guardians deal projectile damage, which would mean that if we equipped projectile protection, we should be safer from them. Well, let's find out. So I've got my armor here with projectile protection. I take 3 hearts, switch over to protection, and I just take 1. So it doesn't actually benefit you to use projectile protection in this way. Instead, regular protection is going to work just fine, because this is considered as magic damage, where the beam will bypass armor points entirely, and it only gets reduced by resistance potion effects or the regular protection enchantment. It's possible to get a pillager's crossbow to break after a certain amount of uses, but can the same be said about a skeleton? Well, by the looks of it, my shield's going to break first. And if we were to go and check in, the skeleton's bow that it's given is given at damage 383, so it should have broken by this point. So if we were to give ourselves that same bow that it's using, it only could do 1 shot before it's broken. I take my 1 arrow, point it towards this guy, immediately breaks. The skeleton's not the same. Myth busted. An enderman will not attack you when you look at it from a tower of scaffolding. This enderman will not reach me up here. It does not climb the scaffolding, the same way that it would if we had a ladder here. Will it attack me when I'm inside of it? Hold on. So it will still attack me, but if I start scaling up, the enderman won't scale up with me. So the tower of scaffolding completely negates this enderman from attacking me. Myth confirmed. So this one says that if we summon in an enderman, get it angry, and then apply a carved pumpkin, it won't stay angry at me. Which unfortunately for me, I'm not only dying, but I'm dying in the stupidest way possible. Granted, I can't anger it when I'm wearing it, but if I go and apply this here, the job's already been done. So attach your carved pumpkin as a preventative measure and not as something after the fact. So myth confirmed. But what if we were to take our enderman and make it wear the carved pumpkin? So we've got an enderman here that's wearing a carved pumpkin in its secret inventory, even though you can't see it. So if I look at it, is it gonna get mad at me? Sure enough. Let's maybe move to the next section before I glance my eyes off this Enderman. Myth busted. A magma cube can bounce on slime. Let's find out. Set up my slime into position and then place a magma cube over top of it. Will it bounce on the slime block? Nope. Slime entities themselves just aren't actually bouncy. What we're actually seeing here is that it's bouncing off of the blocks underneath it enough to look like it's bouncing, but it's not actually bouncing with the mob. So, myth busted. This says that a zombified piglin in the nether has the ability to spawn regular zombies. If I go and apply my kit here, and then set the reinforcement attribute for the zombie pigments to the max. Now, if I were to go and attack these zombie pigments, will they summon in any kind of zombie? Every time that they take damage, they'll attempt to spawn more. So let's see. So far, no regular zombies. We'll try damaging them a little bit more. Huh. So look at that. Ever since snapshot 24W33A for the 1.21.2 version of the game, it was made so that any non-zombie undead mob wouldn't go and summon reinforcements for regular zombies. So our husks, our drowned, our zombified piglins, even zombie villagers, they don't summon in as reinforcements regular zombies. Myth busted. This myth says that if we take a blaze and give it water breathing potion, then it'll become immune to water damage. We got our blaze, it's got water breathing on it, and by the looks of it, it might be breathing in the water, but it won't be breathing for long. And we could even see this if I were to go and take some more splash potions of water breathing. Definitely has the effect, but with those regular splash water bottles that observers throwing down, it will still take damage, and increased damage at that. Myth busted. So the Enderman sound clips that we hear are actually English in reverse. So let's see. We got our Enderman here, and we can listen into it. So there are some lines that do sound like they're saying something, like there just said like it sounded, "What's up?" And while this is stated as an official bit of text that happens in the loading text for Bedrock Edition, according to a Mojang Says video, the developers themselves actually contradict this idea.
I don't think they're speaking English backwards and not that easy.
So it could just be speculation, but what I will say is that myth busted. So what we're seeing here is a myth that the fossils that we find inside of the nether are actually the remains of sniffers. Which I gotta say, for this to be true, they would have to be a whole lot bigger as sniffers. And considering the biggest we've ever seen a sniffer get is about this size, I wouldn't say that it has any relation, especially since there's no other ties to the sniffer inside of the nether. However, the fossils that we find in the overworld, maybe there's an argument there, but the ones that we're seeing in the Soul Sand Valley, I think especially because there's dried gas that we're seeing next to them, there's much more likelihood that it has something to do with the gas as opposed to our sniffer friends. Myth busted. This myth says that wither skeletons are immune to wither roses. Sure enough. And if we were to get a regular skeleton down, we'll see just that. A regular skeleton takes the effect, but the wither skeleton, not only is it immune to wither roses, it's just immune to the wither effect in general. Myth confirmed. So this myth is that a shulker is immune to fall damage. Well, let's find out. Now, if I were to go and summon a shulker up here, it'll always teleport down. You can't summon it midair. So is it immune to fall damage? Sure, but it's never actually falling. Even with commands, it just doesn't work. It'll give you the command feedback. Target is invulnerable to the given damage type. And if we were to do the same with a sheep, there you go. So, myth confirmed. This myth says that a piglin will dance if it kills any mob besides a hoglin. So we've got our piglin. We're gonna get it aggro towards this chicken. Well, no dance, no fanfare, but it is a rare chance. Let's summon in a few more chickens. But sure enough, it's only coded so they do this after a successful hoglin hunt. So, myth busted. So this myth says that given enough time and enough endermen, they will grief your base. Well, let's see. So if you were to have a base kind of like this, where it's half made out of natural blocks and half made out of stone, the endermen would grief the other parts that we're seeing here with the dirt and the rooted dirt. But the truth is that they can't pick up stone by design. So no matter how much time you give them or how many endermen you have, they could never fully break this unless you change something in the code. So myth partially busted. If you have a dirt house, it's not looking great for you. This one says that piglins can pick up non-gold armor and weapons. So if we have our piglin here and I were to give it down some diamond options, will it pick these up instead? Sure enough, we got a diamond wearing piglin. But as soon as I throw down a gold item, it'll always prefer to wear the gold instead of the diamond. To them, it's all about the bling, regardless of if it's a worse armor choice. Myth confirmed. This myth says that Happy Ghast, if given enough time, will fly away forever if left untethered. Well, we could tick sprint and try to see if this is true or not. So while it does fly outside of our base's range, the truth is that the Happy Ghast always stays within a 64 block radius if it doesn't have a harness, and that gets trimmed down if it does. So no matter how far away I get from the observatory, it's always going to stay somewhere around where we're keeping our base to. The way that the Happy Ghast determines determines its home is that it'll be depending on where you last unattached a lead, dismounted it, equipped or removed its harness, no longer tempted it with a tempting item like a snowball or a harness, or if it stopped following a mob. So basically, the last time you interacted with it, that's going to be the area that it remembers to stay active in. Myth busted. The myth we're testing is that pigs will only eat carrots. Well, while they're definitely associated with carrots, if I were to try any of these other items, like potatoes, they'll surely work, and beetroots as well also work for the pigs. So any of these 3 food items do just the trick. And in fact, I believe it's golden carrots that they don't care anything about. So, myth busted. While riding a camel, it'll make you immune to any kind of melee damage. If I go into survival and I have this husk down here, I am safe to this melee damage. But that's only true given where the husk relative is. So as soon as it steps up, it is able to hit me. It just needs a footstool before it's able to do anything. But as long as you're staying to the flat desert down here, you are pretty safe on the camel. Oh, but an Enderman is tall enough to kill you on top of the camel. So partially confirmed, but not totally. This one says that a wolf in wolf armor can take any amount of damage and still survive. So let's see if I take my mace and I go up and get a nice big leap. Our wolf is still fine. The way that it's coded is that a wolf will take any amount of damage up until the point of breaking the armor, and it won't actually touch its health bar. So even using strength to the maximum level, our wolf is still alive. Whereas something like a warden punched the same, dies in 1 hit. So a wolf basically has 2 sets of life bars, which is odd. I thought it was cats that had multiple lives. Is that true with magic damage? No. So this one would be partially true. This one says that if we have a wolf and we have a happy ghast, our wolf will kill the happy ghast. So let me see. I got my happy ghast here. Will it go and just attack the happy ghast as is? My wolf will come towards me, but it will ignore the happy ghast up until the point that I punch it. But that's true for any passive mob. Can a wolf kill a happy ghast? It's true, but I wouldn't say it's true in any kind of interesting way. And untamed ones, they completely ignore it. We'll give it a partial confirm. This myth says that if we have an untamed wolf and a tamed wolf, we can't breed the 2 together. So I'll tame one of these up. There's our domesticated wolf. But if I take my pork chop and breed them up, sure enough, you can't breed an untamed wolf with a tamed wolf, even though both are now in love mode. There you go, myth confirmed. To get the chicken jockey music disc, you can't kill the chicken first. If I were to go and slay the chicken and then kill the zombie, no chicken jockey music disc. But the same setup where I kill the zombie first, sure enough, that's the only way to get the chicken jockey music disc, which makes sense, because otherwise when you kill off the chicken first, it's just a baby zombie. It's not a chicken jockey. Myth confirmed. All right, so last time, we had a bunch of chickens attached to leads, and we tried to make a chicken parachute. We said in the last video that myth was busted, but someone said that if we give them slow falling first, then it would work. We'll take all of our chicken, look at all those chickens, get them on a couple of leads. There we go. And then if I give them slow falling, now will this save us from the fall? Let's find out. I mean, kind of, but it's misleading. Because what's actually happening here is that the slow falling's saving me from the fall, and not the chickens themselves. And if I were to clear the same effect and try this again, and then if I fall like this, not only does that not save me, but it also keeps the chickens up there in the middle of the air. So all that does is break a couple of leads and my spine. Myth busted. All right, so this is a fox that trusts me. And you can see that because it's not running away from me when I get close. So if I were to get attacked by a mob like a husk, will the fox go after it with the sword? Well, I'd hope so. I bought it for it. Hey, sure enough. So even though foxes can't be tamed in the same sense that wolves can, it will go after the husk like so. And mobs that they would normally attack, like chickens, they'll go after just the same anyway. They'll even prioritize it over this mob that's about to hit me. Thanks. So, myth confirmed. This one states that pandas are completely passive mobs. Well, let's see. I've got my panda here. It seems pretty passive. Let's give it a punch. Whoa! Not only is it not passive, it's a neutral mob that can do 4.5 hearts of health, but it only does 1 punch to retaliate against me. It all has to do with the specific panda variant that we find. And it would be this panda here, the angry panda, that actually would have a chance of going against us. So is this one just straight up hostile? Doesn't look like it, but if I attack it first, ow! Does it keep attacking you after you hit it though? Sure enough, so the aggressive one will keep attacking you once it's provoked, whereas other variants of the panda might give up after a certain amount of time. But even fully aggressive, it's still a neutral mob. So, myth busted. This one states that bees are doomed to die after they sting you. Well, that would be based on real life, so let's see. So if I get stung by this bee, not only does it sting me, but it also loses its stinger in the process. If you look at this bee, it now has no stinger on its butt anymore. Now I know I'm not doing so great. How does the bee fare? Well, so far so fine. Ah, there it goes. Myth confirmed. This one states that dolphins, even though they are aquatic mobs, require a mix of both air and water to survive. If I were to give this a ceiling and then we tick sprint, even though it's fully given all of the water that it can need, eventually the dolphin will die from not having enough air. Sure enough. But we do that same test and we remove the lid, the dolphin will be fine. Myth confirmed. This one says that sheep can only graze on grass blocks. So if we shear off the wool off the sheep, it'll only get it back if it was next to grass. But as we can see there, that's just not the case, considering it is able to eat actual grass items that generates on top of blocks like the short grass that we have here. So it ate the short, dry grass to regain its wool. The issue being though is that it does remove it in the process. So it's not a permanent solution the same way that our grass might be renewable, but it does work. Myth busted. This one states that Iron Golem will give a baby villager a poppy on rare occasions. Now this has definitely been in the game, and the truth is that it still is, but you're not going to see it on Java anymore. So as we can see here, the golem does still offer out the poppy. It's just that due to a bug, it won't actually have the baby villager accept it anymore. So myth busted. This one says that allays do not dance to the broken music disc like they do to other ones. Let's find out. Oh, sure enough, not only are they dancing to it, but they seem to love it. They love it a lot more than I do, I'll tell you that much. Myth busted. In Bedrock Edition, the allays can blink, but this one says the Java Edition doesn't. Pretty awkward staring contest, and it'll be extremely awkward because they do not blink in Java. They also said the allays can blink in Bedrock, but after hours of studying it, it's just not so. Though there are resource packs over there that allow this to happen, but otherwise it's just the players that's blinking. So I guess that means myth double busted. This one states that a snow golem inside of a desert biome given fire resistance will actually survive. Well, that one didn't last very long. Let's try the fire resistance. Hey, sure enough. So as long as it has fire resistance, it'll actually survive inside of the desert biome. And actually, myth's so confirmed that if we were to go over into the nether, it's also true that our snow golems will survive there. Myth confirmed. Our villager breeders are made using farmer villagers. So this myth says that farmer villagers are required for villager breeding. Well, let's find out. We're about to have 2 librarians. Can they link up over shared interest? And sure enough, we're seeing villager love hearts come up because you're able to breed between any kind of villager profession. So farmer villagers aren't required. However, they are required for automatic breeders, since they would be able to go harvest all of the crops themselves and then give that to other villagers, giving you an automatic breeder. But as long as you offer the food yourself, it's just fine without. Myth busted. So this myth says that if we have an iron golem that's broken up, but we usually could repair it with iron ingots, this one says that we can repair it even faster using iron blocks. But no matter how hard I'm right-clicking on this, I cannot interact with it using iron blocks. And in fact, the quickest way to repair your iron golem with iron blocks would be that you just build a new iron golem. But as far as what this is saying, myth busted. This myth states that swamp villagers have a guaranteed mending book enchantment. So we've got our swamp villager, it's now a swamp librarian. If I go and trade with it, curse of binding. Not only is there no mending for it, but there's really no difference between the different biome types of villagers. And the reason that this myth might exist is that there's currently experimental snapshots that are out that would make these changes, but they're not in the base game. So if you're going taking all the effort to breed your villagers inside of the swamp to even get this rare variant, it's not going to make a difference for you. Myth busted. If we have a villager and a bed, it can sleep in any dimension. So as soon as I set it over to night, there's no night sky over here in the nether. However, the villagers are able to sleep just fine. The bed doesn't even explode. And if that's true for the nether, let's see it in the end. We got this villager's house on location, set it to night, and sure enough, it's able to sleep here, even if we can't. Myth confirmed. This myth states that you're able to milk squids. All right, let's give it a shot. If I take my bucket and try to milk the squid, it doesn't work. However, it did used to work. Because this was added during beta 1.2, you were able to milk the squids for a regular milk bucket. But it was then removed back in beta 1.301. So if the myth is that you used to be able to milk squids, then that is confirmed, regardless of how much I wish it wasn't. TNT no longer activates when you punch it. Now, this used to be how TNT was originally before we had a way to light it off, and it made it really destructive if you placed down a thing of TNT because you couldn't get it back. Is this still the case? If I break it in creative, nothing's gonna happen. But if I punch this in survival, it does explode. And really, this has nothing to do with mods and everything to do with the NBT data, since it still exists that you're able to use the give command to give yourself TNT unstable. So while it's true in survival, it is actually false overall for vanilla. This myth says that falling anvils do more damage than dripstone. Well, let's give that a test here. We've got our pointed dripstone, we got our anvils, and let's see. Observer, if you wouldn't mind being my test subject, or if you want to drop it on my head. How much damage did that do? Okay, 4.5, maybe 5 hearts. Now let's see with pointed dripstone. All right, so we're gonna have to place the solid block 1 higher so that we're dropping it at the same elevation. All right, our dripstone bullet. Well, I think we can safely say that does more damage. So after just 4 blocks fallen, dripstones will deal 18 damage, while the anvil will only do 6. All right, we got another falling anvil one. This one says that falling anvils remove lava in the column that they fall through. So if I place our anvil right here, we've got a solid pool of lava. Will it fall through and remove the lava? No, because it counts as an entity as it's falling. It doesn't remove any of these because it doesn't actually count as taking up the block. And it's only going to remove that bottommost. So the way that I would get rid of all this lava is with a whole bunch of iron and a whole bunch of noise. This myth says that conduits prevent underwater mobs spawning in a radius around it. We will see, do any mobs spawn next to this conduit? Well, we'll have to fly a bit away to be able to make sure that they have enough distance away from us to spawn. So we're seeing a bunch of drown pop up in the outskirts. However, there's never going to be any directly next to the conduit, but it has nothing to do with the conduit's range and more with the fact that the conduit's a light source. And so even if I'm going to go have conduit power all the way over here, it doesn't actually change anything with the mob spawning. This myth says the best tool to mine bamboo is an axe. Let's test that. So while an axe is definitely going to be faster than my fist to take down bamboo, the truth is that a sword is the one that's the only instant break for bamboo, at least until you start to add enchantments onto the axe. But every time that I'm taking down one of those, it's doing double the amount of durability to my sword. So I'm at 236 right now. I break this, it goes down to 234. It's not the proper use of the tool. So is it the best tool for bamboo? That really comes down to you. This myth says that cobblestone is mined at the same speed as stone. All right, so I've got my haste 2, I've got my efficiency 5 pickaxe. I can instant mine through the stone. It is not quite instant to go through the cobblestone. As you can see here, it's going much slower than this. And on single blocks, it might be hard to notice, but when you're going through a lot of it, it really shows how much faster we go through clean stone. So the myth that we're testing is, does amethyst give off light? Well, let's find out. So sure enough, they do give off small amounts of light level given into the block. But the confusion here might be that they aren't emissive the same way that we think of like glow ink sacs or glow squids. The large one even gives up to a light level of 5. Not bad for something you can grow. This myth says that cobwebs are flammable. Well, let's enable fire tick and give it a shot. If I take my flint and steel here, I can't directly ignite the cobwebs. That isn't a good sign, but let's see if after enough time will it spread. So sure enough, we can see it breaking every single flammable block next to it except for the cobwebs. And the reason this myth might exist is because when you see fire start to spread through an abandoned mine shaft, it'll burn all the other blocks around it, but the cobwebs remain intact, even if the mine shaft doesn't. So this myth says that creaking hearts have a chance to generate when growing a pale oak tree. Well, let's find out and start to grow up my tree. Is there going to be any creaking hearts inside? Well, the truth is, no matter how many saplings I'm placing down, we're never going to get an actual post-generation creaking heart. They don't work the same way that beehives do when you plant a flower next to your sapling. And instead, if you're wanting more creaking hearts to prank your friends, you're just going to need 2 pale logs and a block of resin. No amount of bone meal is going to solve this for you. Are resin blocks effective scaffolding? So of course, we've got a few other blocks that work as common scaffolding, those being dirt blocks, which are slow to break unless you have the right shovel. Literal scaffolding, which always breaks instantly with a fist. Even T&D can work well as scaffolding because you can instant break it just as easily as you place it. But is a block of resin the same? And sure enough, you can break it fast enough where you even fall through and break your legs at the bottom. So be careful if you're using it. This myth says that red sand can be cooked into red glass. Let's take our coal and give that a test. Any second now, just regular glass is all you're gonna get. And nor does cooking red concrete powder give you any kind of red glass. The only way that you're gonna get this is by dyeing it after the fact in a crafting recipe. This myth says that you need silk touch to mine tinted glass. Well, we got our tinted glass here. Let's give it a check. Sure enough, it does break and give you back the tinted glass. The truth is that it would happen even if I was using a regular pickaxe. In fact, even my fist is enough to break the tinted glass and get it back. I guess all that amethyst you're using to reinforce it keeps it safe and not turning into shards. And thankfully so if I'm breaking it with my fist. This myth says that you're able to create a strange end portal if you align the directions of them out of order. So we have all of our end portals looking like they're placed in the right order for the frames, but as soon as I light it up, will it create this strange end portal outside of the portal? And sure enough, it is is fully possible inside of vanilla to get this way. And Observer's favorite strange one is that if you build it vertically, like we would a nether portal, it's not going to light in the middle here, but it does light up top, giving us a very strange but functional end portal. So obviously we can't use our clocks inside of the nether, but can we use eye blossoms? Because these open at night. We've got different kinds of eye blossoms planted down here, but the truth is that no matter how much time is passing over here in the nether, we're not going to be privy to it, because the eye blossoms will always keep the state that you place them in when you plant them down. Whereas in the overworld, if I planted down an open eye blossom, it would close in the daylight and then open at night. Running on soul sand or soul soil will drain your boots if you're using soul speed. Well, let me give it a shot. My boots are clean and pristine. I put these on and I start sprinting with soul speed over here. And as long as I keep walking over these, eventually, sure enough, the durability's gone down 3 points. So soul speed, while great as it is to get you around, it is also going to take a little bit out of your durability. This myth says that soul sand can glitch you into lava. Well, let's give it a shot. So if I'm in survival here and I start walking around, if I'm crouching on the end, soul sand in its hitbox aligns you low enough where you're technically just sinking into the lava even if you're shifting on the edge. Whereas if I do it on the netherrack, I'm completely fine. And if you want an easy way to visualize this, let's get down our armor stands to show it off. That armor stand is sinking that much lower than the one on the netherrack. So it's not a glitch, it's intentional game design. This myth says that you don't have to go to the nether fortress to get nether wart. Well, as we can see here, that's demonstrably true, because in certain bastion remnants, you're able to find nether wart and soul sand down at the bottom here. But the truth is that if you actually wanted to go and use these to brew up potions, well, you could find a brewing stand naturally generated inside of a cleric house in a village. You do need blaze powder to actually make the potions. And the whole reason that it was changed to need blaze powder was because of these workarounds. Can you use splash water bottles to harden concrete powder in the nether? Well, for reference, if I'm on fire in the nether and I use a splash water bottle, it'll keep me safe, even extinguishing the fire. So does that same water that we brought in a jar work on these concrete powders? Unfortunately, no. So you'll need to pre-water your concrete before you bring it in. Myth busted. This myth says that if you wear a piglin head, it'll work like gold armor for making piglins safe. Well, let's find out, as apparently it doesn't take very kindly to me wearing one of its skin. But while it is true that piglins will still attack you if you're not wearing gold armor, it does have the same stealth effect that we see in Java Edition, where it lowers the detection range of different mobs. And that can be stacked up by using things like invisibility as well as sneaking. And then if I get close, if I were to take off the piglin head, then you'll see that was the only thing keeping me safe up to that distance. But it doesn't keep you completely safe, but it does reduce the range. So regular spawners, we can change what mob spawns inside by using a spawn egg. Is the same true for our trial spawners? Well, let's find out. We've got trial spawner here with no mobs inside. Well, sure enough, the wardens work. So as long as the mobs have the right block for them to spawn, whether that's water for aquatic mobs or grass for our passive mobs, we could spawn in a whole bunch of mobs this way. This myth says that vines will only spawn in the jungles or swamp biomes. But if we teleport onto location, in recent versions of the game, that just isn't so. Because when we get these tipped over logs that generate naturally in our forest, they can occasionally have vines on them. This myth says that lily pad direction is completely randomized. The truth is that no matter how I place this lily pad in this exact block, it'll always face in the exact direction. While it is randomized with the world seed, the truth is that you can actually use this as a preset code. And that goes back to an old video that Simply Sark used, where you could use these to define the hidden code to get into your secret base. Do the new cactus flowers break our cactus farms? Well, let's give it a shot. If we take our random tick speed and set it up to 3000, you'll see that even though these ones that we have cactus flowers on top of will stop it from spawning, if there aren't any cactus flowers currently on these cacti, they'll continue to grow and work just the same. So your current cactus farm is not going to be broken by this update. This myth says that dry grass can be bone mealed like regular grass. So if I were to take down some bone meal and just use it like I would on grass blocks, do we get any kind of dry grass? No, it's only directly bone mealing the grass that allows us to get more. In this way, it's a lot more similar to the regular bushes that we're seeing that grow elsewhere. This myth says that it's possible for a cactus to grow taller than 3 blocks. Well, we can definitely see this one's 4 blocks tall. In fact, if you go and explore the world, you might see a couple of those happen, but it has nothing to do with how tall the cactus is growing, and it has everything to do with world generation. Since what can happen is that, strangely enough, it'll place multiple cacti in the same block, giving you a taller cactus. There have been specific seeds that have been found by people like GeoSquare that can go even taller, over 20 blocks tall for one singular cactus in a seed. But if you were to go place down a cactus yourself, it's never going to grow taller than 3 blocks. This myth says that ferns can drop seeds just like grass. Well, let's take my fortune hoe and give that a shot. If I go against our regular grass, we're gonna get plenty of seeds there. Now let's break the ferns. And sure enough, right from the first one there, we're able to get seeds from ferns. This myth says that a furnace can produce enough light to melt the ice. Well, let's check that out. If I start to light off our furnace with our raw iron here, we can definitely tell it's giving off some amount of light here, but is it the same as our redstone torches, or is it going to actually melt the ice? Ah, there we go. As you can very clearly see, because ice melts at a light level of 11, and our furnaces can give off a light level of 13, it'll eventually melt the ice if you cook something inside. All right, we've got another ice myth. This one says that you can slide 9 times faster on blue ice than packed ice. Well, it does take 9 times the amount of packed ice to turn into blue ice. Let's give it a shot. All right, Observer, I'll take the regular ice. You can take the blue ice. Place down our boats into place. Well, Observer definitely goes faster than me on blue ice. There is a reason to use it, but 9 times faster? That's not the case. While the slipping attribute for blue ice is about 10 times more than it is for packed ice, the resulting boat speeds that we get are 40 blocks per second over on packed ice, and our blue ice goes up to 72.73 blocks per second, giving a boat speed that's roughly 1.8 times faster. This myth says that dispensers can be triggered by wind charges. If I take my wind charge and I throw it towards the dispenser, the only wind charge coming out is the one that I dropped off. And in fact, the reason that this might look like it's the case is because when you're in a trial chamber and you throw it towards any kind of button or lever down there, that will cause the dispenser to go off. And now we can see it shooting off. But without that button, the dispenser itself doesn't get activated. So on Java, we're not able to move container blocks. A composter being a container, should we be able to move it? Well, let's find out. Sure enough, even though the composter is holding different values inside of it with how much compost is inside, it is able to be pushed on both versions. And it's the same reason why we could push a cauldron like this, because it has a fill level, but it doesn't technically work as a container block. This myth says that chiseled bookshelves can power an enchanting table if fully filled up with books. Well, we've got all of our chiseled bookshelves with a whole bunch of books inside, but can we enchant anything worthwhile out of this? The answer is no. Our max level is the same as if the enchanted table didn't have any bookshelves next to it. And another way to know that this isn't working is because we can't see the particles going between it like we could if we used regular bookshelves, as you can see here. This myth says that if you power a drip leaf with redstone, it'll never fall. Well, let's give that a test. If I go on this unpowered one, obviously it falls down, but this one with the lever, just like that, it's completely safe for me to go on, giving you a way of setting up a unique kind of parkour course to run through. And in fact, even if it's fallen down, like so, as soon as I go and power it up, it immediately flips up. And that would be the reason why you find the drip leaf inside of the redstone blocks category of the creative menu. This myth says that hay bales will keep you completely safe from any kind of fall damage. Well, they definitely reduce it, but as you can see there, I do still take some amount of fall damage, but a lot less than if I fall off to the side. And the reason for this is that hay bales reduce the amount of fall damage by 80% consistently, meaning that you'd need to fall over 100 blocks to die from full health on a bunch of these hay bales. But it doesn't keep you completely safe, so myth busted. Candles can be lit with a flame enchanted bow. Well, let's give it a shot, and then if I go and pick up my flame arrow, the candles are fully lit. And in fact, the same would be true for our campfires. This myth says that you can bridge across gaps using only signs. Well, we definitely can't stand safely on these signs. We can't even go and crouch to the edge of them. But by using hanging signs, when placed horizontally like so, the top part of it does actually have a collision, giving us a safe way to walk across. It's just a little eerie to watch yourself do it, but you can even go and crouch on top of it, so it's still pretty safe. This myth says that barrier blocks can be waterlogged. Well, as we can see from this very oddly built water house, that's completely true. And as of 1.20.2, we're now able to place down a barrier block and then fill it up with some kind of water. You just can't fill it up with the tadpole, but this is a way to give you solid non-flowing water blocks in the air, or as a way to do a walking on water prank if you wanted to. This myth says that water can hydrate farmland that it doesn't even touch. Well, let's give it a shot. Remove some of these dead bushes, then till our soil. Will this farmland go into actual hydrated farmland? Sure enough, even though the water isn't even touching it, it's just waterlogged inside of a block like so, it actually can work across farmland in a wide range. This myth says that lava can be used to break your fall the same way that we use water to do it. Well, let's find out. Ow! While lava does slow down your fall momentum, it doesn't actually make it completely safe. Also, the fact that you're going to be standing in lava as soon as you land on your destination, which isn't very safe either. But if I were to give myself fire resistance, even then if I fall into the lava, I just fall through slower, giving me less fall damage for sure, but still fall damage. Can magma blocks warm up our our striders even if they're outside of the lava? Well, let's find out. We got our strider here, and even though it's on the magma block, it's still cold. However, it's not actually taking any damage from the magma blocks. So while there is a special behavior just for our striders, it doesn't seem to like it very much anyway. This myth says that jungle leaves are less likely to drop their saplings than regular kinds of leaves. Well, let's find out. We've got our block of jungle leaves here, and then if we do a tick sprint, we'll see that even though we have so many jungle leaves that we place down here, the truth is that jungle leaves only have a 2.5% chance of dropping saplings compared to 5% of the other blocks, which is pretty brutal if you want to make yourself a 2x2 sapling tree. And then if you were to use fortune, then it would go up to 4.17% if you're using jungle, but 10% over here on the other leaf blocks. Only 3 from that whole set. This myth says that granite, andesite, and diorite aren't craftable inside of a crafting table, but let's find out. So if I take all of my blocks here, as you can see, recommended by the recipe book, we actually can use quartz along with our blocks to give ourselves different kinds of stone blocks. Although it's so expensive that I don't really know why you'd be using it anyway. This myth says that barrels are cheaper to craft than our chests, so let's find out that. Alright, so to even go and craft up our barrel, I'm gonna have to use 3 planks spent to go and make the 6 oak slabs, and then it's 6 planks along the sides here, and 2 of those slabs, giving me a net spend of 9 planks, but we keep at least 2 of those blocks as slabs. Whereas if I wanted to craft up a chest, I technically keep 1 more plank, but I don't have as many blocks to build with. So it is technically cheaper, only costing 7 planks to craft up a barrel. You are going to use more planks effectively to get that. So I'll give this one a partial confirm. So carpets can be placed down to avoid vibrations from the skulk sensor. Is the same true for the moss carpet block? If I'm walking like so, I don't even have to be sneaking and the skulk sensor doesn't pick me up. But if I walk over to the moss carpet, unfortunately, it does give off some kind of sound. And luckily I'm learning this now before the warden goes and realizes it too. So ever since the changes to how our blocks actually break down into ore counterparts, a lot of us are actually going against these and breaking down our iron into the raw ore drop and then smelting that. But this myth says that it's impossible to go and smelt the actual ores instead, which if we go and check this out, even though I'm putting gold ore inside, it will still give me full gold ingots. But the truth is that if you're doing this, while it is technically confirmed, it is ridiculous. You can go and fortune the block as well, getting you up to 5 drops from it, meaning 5 potential ingots. So if you see your friends still making this mistake, you gotta bring them up to the modern age. This myth says that copper blocks cannot be used to power up a beacon. Well, we got a whole thing of copper blocks placed down here like so, and then I get my beacon into place. Nothing. Yeah, unfortunately, this myth is busted. And if you want to know what blocks that you can use to make your beacon, it's going to be all the ones that are listed here as materials that you could use to power up the beacon. Netherite, emerald, diamond, gold, and iron. The myth that we're testing here is that copper won't oxidize when you place it underwater. Well, let's give that a shot, placing our copper down onto these target blocks here. And as you can clearly see from our first victim there, it will actually still oxidize even if you have it underwater. This myth says that it's possible to make a completely safe wither statue. Well, let me take the blocks here and give it a shot. I place down my wither statue like so. Why didn't it spawn? Well, the reason is that if you have a block that's underneath it, it can technically ruin the structure. And then at that point, it always has to be one of the wither skulls that's planted down last. If I were to have those first and then switch it out, it doesn't matter how much soul soil or soul sand I place underneath, I'll have a completely safe and very scary scarecrow. And it could be a fun way to prank your friends, making them think that you're gonna place down the wither when instead you didn't have anything planned. Hitting villagers apparently doesn't raise the prices on Bedrock Edition. Well, they clearly don't like it on Java, but if we go over into Bedrock and try it out, surely enough, as much as you punch the mob, it'll never raise its prices. Alright, this says that lily pads are thicker in Bedrock Edition. Now, there's a couple of different things that this could mean. Are they talking about the hitbox, or are they talking about the physical model? But the truth is that neither of those seem to be the case. And if we look at it off to the side here, our lily pads show as no thicker in Bedrock than they do on Java. Do Bedrock Edition fishing rods have more durability than Java Edition? Well, it'll take a little while to test, because we're only able to view the actual durability exactly on Java Edition. There's unfortunately no debug menu that we could use to see it over here in Bedrock. But if we look at the relative amount of uses, there's hundreds more that we're able to use on the fishing rod in Bedrock Edition than we're ever able to see on Java. You can have 2 end portals and 1 stronghold in Bedrock Edition. Now, the reason this myth might exist is that Bedrock Edition strongholds generate very differently than how they do in Java. Here, the strongholds can generate randomly throughout the world as long as they're 160 blocks away from from the world origin. But in Java Edition, there actually is a specific limit of how many strongholds we'll see, that being 128, and they'll all generate in rings outward, making sure that none of them overlap. But in Bedrock Edition, while it's extremely rare to happen, there have been seeds in the past where there have been 2 end portals generating between 2 combined strongholds, meaning that while technically it is 2 strongholds, I'd say visually this myth's confirmed. On Java Edition, the axes are stronger than Bedrock Edition, and while we can test that out, it is actually easiest to see by just looking over and seeing how much damage is listed on the item. On Java Edition, our stone, iron, and diamond axes all do the same amount of damage, which is more than any of our swords. But in Bedrock Edition, they're much weaker, meaning that over there you're just better off using the sword. This next myth says that ender pearls throw the exact same in both editions. But if we go and check this out, not only does it throw differently, but on Bedrock Edition it ends up being much further, meaning that it could be possible that you could easily clutch with an ender pearl in Bedrock Edition where you can in Java. Does staring freeze an enderman in both versions? Well, we can test this out in Java and see that if you lock eyes with the enderman, while it will get angry, it won't actually attack you until you look away. But in Bedrock Edition, as long as you locked eyes, it's gonna come after you. When you rename a campfire, it'll show the name on Bedrock Edition. And so if we take a campfire into an anvil, give it a name and place it down, sure enough, it does render the name on top of it. But in Java, because the block's considered differently in the code, nothing actually shows up over here. You can't even break the campfire to get back the named version. While water and redstone doesn't mix in Java Edition, is it true that you can waterlog repeaters on Bedrock? Well, sure enough, we can place any of these redstone components underneath the water in Bedrock Edition, and they'll function as expected, which for someone who's used to playing Java, this just looks so cursed to me. Our next myth is that entity cramming doesn't exist on Bedrock Edition, and what that would mean is that while in Java Edition we can only have 24 mobs in a single block space before it starts to apply extra damage to another mob, in Bedrock Edition it actually doesn't matter. There's not even a game rule that exists for this. It's truly a Java exclusive feature, so I guess don't expect to get squished if you're playing on Bedrock Edition. This myth says that Guardian laser beams are different colors in the different versions. Well, if we place down a Guardian and then get it angry, we'll see that they actually do show up in different colors, which is the kind of discrepancy that I would never expect to see. I don't know why you wouldn't just reuse the texture across both. And I guess on either version, I'm not exactly excited to get targeted by a Guardian anyway. If you hold down the right click button, it's possible to water bucket clutch easily on both versions. Well, if we get up to a tall height and then get our water bucket in hand, this is gonna work on Bedrock Edition, but unfortunately for us on Java, it all comes down to timing, which is a pretty brutal reality, meaning that it's easier to both bridge on Bedrock and save yourself if you fall off. This myth says that our dispensers are less accurate when they shoot out arrows on Java Edition than they are on Bedrock. While I'm pretty sure that this was true, it has been changed in the code, so let's give it a test. And as we can see from this discrepancy, it actually turns out that our dispensers are more accurate on Java than they are on Bedrock. When you press space again while flying with an elytra, it'll actually disable it while playing in Bedrock Edition. Well, as you can clearly see on Java, no matter how much I'm pressing the space bar, it's not actually going to disable my elytra. And thankfully so if you need to enable it in a pinch. But on Bedrock Edition, if you don't stop after that second space press, you're likely to just fall off the cliff that you just jumped off of, which is pretty brutal. When you place sand on top of TNT, it can make it explode underwater. Well, this is a trick we've definitely shown off in the past working in Java, and there, it works great, but I'm curious to see how it works on Bedrock Edition. And the truth is, how it works on Bedrock Edition really depends on the setup that you have. Since if we just light it off in the ocean like so, then our sand will actually push the TNT out of the way. But if you ignite it in a tube of water that's 1 by 1 like so, where the TNT can't slide out of place, then it will actually explode underwater. So I'm gonna say partially confirmed, but I'm leaning towards saying busted, because it definitely doesn't work in an exciting way like it does on Java. By setting up the right amount of TNT and redstone, you might have seen this video where they show off making a heart-shaped pattern using TNT. And while it's definitely true on Bedrock Edition, there's a reason you're only seeing those videos over there, because as soon as you try this trick on Java Edition, you're gonna be left with a lot of explosions, but not as much love. The next time that you go to eat food, pay attention to the first-person arm, since this myth says that you're able to see your arm while eating in Bedrock Edition, but not in Java. And as you can see from this comparison, it's false, because we can't see it on either version. At least we can't see it in first person. And I think the reason this myth might exist is that if you go into third person, you can see the arm eating animation in Bedrock. It just doesn't happen at all on Java. So while that might be a fact, this myth's still busted. While you can waterlog a bed in both versions, is it possible to sleep in that waterlogged bed? Well, on Java Edition, it definitely is. And in fact, it's actually a safe way to get away from mobs that can't swim down to find you inside of a lake. But if we try it on Bedrock, we can definitely place it down here, but we can't actually sleep in the waterlogged bed. This myth says that cookies can kill parrots instantly. Well, if we right-click them with a cookie on Java Edition, we're definitely going to see that's the case. And while I thought that's what would happen on Bedrock Edition, it's a little confusing. Since sure, it does still kill the parrot, but instead it applies an effect called Fatal Poison that takes a little bit of time to kill the parrot, as opposed to what we're seeing on Java, where it's just a right-click and it's done. Can you place torches on honey blocks? surface. Well, some transparent blocks can be a little weird for this, but as we can see on Bedrock Edition, it is possible to fully place torches on side of our honey blocks. However, for those of us in Java, it's not possible, because while the honey block doesn't look any smaller than a regular block, it's treated as if you can't place anything on it because it sinks in 1 pixel on each side. So this myth's a partial confirm. When you go underwater in both versions, it's said that it's brighter in Bedrock Edition, which if we go ahead and give that a shot, we can dive under deep and see with this side-by-side comparison that it is in fact brighter in Bedrock Edition. However, it is true that in Bedrock Edition, we have a lot more watercolor maps to look through. And so while it might be brighter, it is also going to be a little bit murkier if you're ending up in some kind of swamp water like so. If you build up a wall with magma blocks, it'll stop spiders from climbing. And if we give this a shot, they can climb in Java Edition, but in fact, they do actually stop the spiders on Bedrock, making a solid wall if you want to defend your base. You might just also hurt yourself in the process. This myth says that you can name your items in 50 character lengths on both versions. And while it's clearly false on Bedrock Edition, that does end up being the case on Java. And funnily enough, the reason it had to be the case in Java is because there used to be an item that was added into the game that had a name so long that it actually wouldn't have even fit if you used it in an anvil after the fact. And that was the waxed, lightly weathered cut copper stairs. This myth says that you can waterlog rails on both versions, which was a later addition on Java Edition, but as you can see here, it does work on both, since only on Bedrock Edition are the rails going to be broken by flowing water. Do lightning rods turn white when struck by lightning on both versions? Well, with the help of a channeling trident or a lightning storm overhead, we can see that in fact it'll only light up this way on Java Edition. This myth says that dogs can only eat seafood on Bedrock Edition, and while this might have only been true for Bedrock in the past, as you can very clearly see, you can feed the dogs on Java the same way anyway. The heart damage particles that you see when you hit a mob only appear on Java. Well, let's test that. And not only does this only work on Java Edition, but as an added fact, you can also count the amount of hearts that come off of when you hit a mob and see just how much damage you actually did. So if you see 7 hearts, it means you did 14 points of damage. This myth says that we can use doors to save ourselves from drowning on Bedrock Edition, much in the same way that we can on Java. And while you might look at this footage and think that it's working, that's only because flowing water stopped by our door. And in fact, as you can see here, if we were to place down these doors in any kind of solid body of water like the ocean, then you're still going to drown down there. This myth says that Bedrock plains biomes have less grass than in Java Edition. And while I never thought I'd have to take up a hobby in counting the amount of grass that I'd see in plains biomes, it is clear to see if you look at both examples side by side, even if I'll never understand why this would be a discrepancy. Did you know that Steve blinks? Well, apparently that's only true on Bedrock Edition, and it makes sense that the version with the marketplace would actually have some kind of animated textures that we've never seen on Java before. This myth says that super flat worlds don't exist on Bedrock Edition, which I can understand where this myth came from, because for such a long time, it was actually true. Though thankfully, in recent years, we've seen that Bedrock Edition actually does have super flat worlds in its versions. Apparently, you can only craft spectral arrows on Java Edition? Well, that's true, but it's not just because there's only a crafting recipe in this version, because spectral arrows don't even exist in Bedrock. I mean, I'm not gonna lie and say they're the most useful item, but not even existing over here? That's something I didn't believe. This myth says that banner patterns don't work on shields on Bedrock Edition. Oh, we can attach them on a crafting table in Java Edition, even if the banner does look worse on the shield. But if we give it a shot on Bedrock, it does actually work nowadays. A common myth is that both Java and Bedrock players can't play together on the same server. And while that's true in the vanilla versions, through the help of special server plugins, it is actually possible. Which I wanted to mention just because I think it's such a cool feat of the community that we're able to even bridge these two versions, even if you have to do some digging into finding out the right way to do it. This says that compasses work in the Nether on Bedrock Edition, but they don't work in Java. And when we bring our compass through with us to the other end, you'll see that it's not going to point us in the right direction on either version, which makes sense. Mojang wants to make sure that you're actually using the lodestones for this purpose. I've heard that ice boat racing is broken on Bedrock Edition, and while it's definitely one of the fastest ways to travel on Java Edition, thankfully it also seems like it works very well on Bedrock Edition too. If it was broken in the past, it's definitely not now. Will villagers sleep in the Nether on both versions? As we've shown off in the past, villagers are able to sleep in beds in both the End and the Nether on Java Edition, but when we set up a bed in the same situations on Bedrock, they also sleep there as well. On Bedrock Edition, if you throw an item at a bell, it'll actually ring, which when we tested it out, it is definitely true and definitely weird. Obviously not the case on Java Edition. You can use Silk Touch to pick up the Pathland block, and if we grab our Silk Touch tool and break down the padded grass, we can pick it up, but only on Bedrock Edition. A classic myth is that water breathing can keep fish alive on land, which as we've unfortunately shown off in the past, just does not work on Java Edition. But let's give it a shot on Bedrock Edition, and sure enough, it actually does keep the Bedrock Edition fish alive. Apparently, there's no sweeping edge edge for Bedrock Edition. And when I hear this, it sounds ridiculous. But sure enough, trying to enchant a sword or searching through the enchanted books in the creative menu, you're never gonna find sweeping edge. It just doesn't exist in this version. You can ride a skeleton horse without a saddle. Well, on Java Edition, this just isn't the case for us. But on Bedrock, this does actually work, making it a lot easier to get your skeleton horse if you find it in a skeleton horse trap. I've heard that nether stars can never despawn on Bedrock Edition, which would be a real plus considering that on Java Edition and older versions, the nether star wasn't even blast proof. So there was a very real possibility that your nether star could get blown up by a last tick wither skull and you'd lose it even after killing the wither. But on Bedrock, it's somehow even better because our nether stars will never despawn on this version, regardless of how much time you wait for it. And after having to go through all the effort to kill the wither on Bedrock Edition, I think it's worth it. If you drink milk on Bedrock Edition, it can't keep you safe from the Elder Guardians. Well, it definitely can remove the mining fatigue, but you'll just gain it right back because on Bedrock Edition, there isn't any cooldown on the way that the Elder Guardians work. Whereas in Java, it's likely going to be set up to a 60-second delay. Can fire aspect swords light candles? Well, our flame bows can, so let's give it a shot. And strangely enough, not only can fire aspect swords apply this to our candles in Bedrock Edition, but also fire aspect enchanted books. This says that snowballs can light on fire in both versions, which if we get down to Snow Golem or throw out a few snowballs of our own, you'll see that in Bedrock Edition, it does cause the snowballs to actually pass on fire to other enemies, making your Snow Golem into a whole flamethrower. But on Java, while there is visual fire on the particles, it doesn't actually transfer over to the mobs. This myth says that you can bone meal sugarcane. Well, it definitely doesn't work on Java, but on Bedrock, it's completely true, which for someone who plays a lot of Java, this is just so cursed for me to see, but also incredibly useful. I've never looked at it, but apparently baby villager heads are bigger on Bedrock Edition. And as you can clearly see from the side by side, it is definitely true. Although after seeing how dumb villager AI is, I doubt it's because they're any smarter. Apparently, Bedrock Edition lets you use a regular pumpkin to make a golem. And while I've seen examples of this being true in the past, in recent versions, it doesn't let you do it anymore. And you're gonna need to carve pumpkin like we do on Java. According to this, snow layers aren't a gravity affected block, which is definitely what I've seen on Java Edition, including these incredibly strange sites of world generation where snow layers can generate floating in the air. But in Bedrock, as we show off like so, it does actually fall to the ground. When you rename a bucket of an axolotl, it'll also name the mob inside. Okay, let's give it a shot. And while this doesn't work on Bedrock Edition, as you can very clearly see here, on Java Edition, it does actually place down the axolotl with the same name. Oxidized copper lightning rods are less likely to get struck by lightning than regular copper lightning rods. Well, we've got oxidized copper lightning rods here on the left, regular copper lightning rods on the right. Let's summon in the thunder and give it a shot. Well, looking at how the particles are showing up, it definitely doesn't seem like they're any less likely. Well, there we go. We got one for the right side. Any for the left? There we go. So it's the exact same. It just comes down to random chance. Myth busted. This myth says that lightning will remove a lightning rod's wax. So we have a waxed exposed lightning rod here. Let's see if I strike it with lightning. And then if I middle mouse click it again, it's still the waxed exposed lightning rod. Another thing that's interesting, even if we have a non-waxed version of the lightning rod on top of the waxed block, it still doesn't deoxidize. So myth busted. This myth says that the copper golem oxidizes faster underwater. So let's take our copper golem statue and place it underwater, and we'll place one right up here. And now if we increase the random tick speed, so this one oxidized here first, and now we've got the one underwater. But there's nothing in the code that says that it should be any different whether it's in water or without. Myth busted. This myth says the copper blocks and copper golems that we're getting are being added into our copper trial chambers. And if you go and explore in here, you'll notice that all of the generation is exactly the same. Nothing's changed, and unfortunately so. I mean, there are chains inside of these copper trial chambers. Why would you not make these copper chains? So myth busted, and myth unfortunately busted. This myth says that it is impossible to stop your oxidized golems from turning into statues. Alright, so we've got our oxidized copper golem here, but because it has this one state before it fully turns into a statue, we could still save it, either by using an axe, or if you want to prevent it completely, honeycomb does the trick. So this myth is busted. You cannot push a copper golem statue with a piston. So let's take our different copper golem statues, place one down, push, and in fact, the piston will break it. This myth is true, and in fact, it is true in all of the different variants of the copper golem. If you wanted it moving, you should have used a living golem. So if I were to build up a copper golem, this myth states that by middle mouse clicking to do the pick block on the golem, it'll give me the statue instead of the golem. But that's not true. It gives me the copper golem spawn egg. And look at that new spawn egg texture too. So myth busted. This myth says that copper golems will drop their flower when they become a statue. So we've got a copper golem here with a flower that it got from an iron golem. And once this little guy turns into a statue, are we going to get that flower back? Well, they sure do take a while before they become a statue. All right, whenever you're ready. There we go. And just like that, we don't even get get the flower back? It just fully disappears. What happens if we axe them back to life? They've officially lost their flower. So the only way to get the flower is if you have a pair of shears and you go after it now. This myth says that copper golems will trigger a trapped chest. So we got a trapped chest right over here. Let's see if it goes and takes stuff from this exposed copper chest. Will it go and interact with the trapped chest? Oh, sure enough. Youch. It even trapped the friend. Myth confirmed. With all the copper changes, we now have copper torches, which while they look differently from regular torches, this myth says that copper torches can't be put out with water. Let's give it a shot. I got my copper torch here, got my regular torch. I take a thing of water, splash it on down. There goes the regular torch. And there goes the copper torch. Sure enough, copper torches have no different functionality to our regular torches. They don't give off a different light level, they just have a different texture. So, myth busted. This myth says that copper lanterns will decay light level like the copper bulbs as they start to oxidize. Let's give a little test here. So, if I were to take a regular copper lantern, we'll see if it gives off the same light level as the different stages. Exposed, weathered, and oxidized. And if you're not seeing a difference, there's a reason for that. There is no difference as these oxidize. And the best way to check this out, observer will come down with me here. So we've got our most oxidized one here, already giving off a lot of light, but as I go against it with the axe, there's no change as I remove the oxidation state. Shelves are capable of holding 5,184 items. Well, by the looks of it, I'm only seeing 3, but the whole reason for that is that if I were to take each of these shulker boxes out, a shulker box can hold 27 stacks of 64. So if we have 3 shulker boxes here, that would give us 5,184 items. Pretty crazy. So, myth confirmed. This myth says that shelves do not interact with hoppers. So, let's see. If I take things out of this shelf, it all fills in from the barrel from the hopper behind it. And if I keep clearing my inventory, it'll keep depositing these same items into the exact same slot. So, myth busted. Copper armor enchants higher than diamond armor. So, I've got my diamond armor here. I've got my copper set here. Let me take my lapis and go try to enchant. Only Unbreaking 3 on my copper leggings, but Unbreaking 3 protection 3 on my diamond leggings. So why does the myth exist? Well, the reason is that copper tools do enchant higher than diamond, but copper armor, not the case. So myth busted. This myth states that copper armor and tools will oxidize like their block counterparts. Well, let's find out. Here I've got my copper pickaxe, shovel, sword, axe, and hoe, all down to the minimum amount of durability, but they don't look any different. In fact, there's no way to craft these up using honeycomb even in the crafting table. It just doesn't exist. So, myth busted, but if you wanted something like that, there does exist a resource pack that we'll link in the description that actually makes this a given feature. And now, the longer I use these, the more worn away the tools get. How cool. This myth states that end flashes only occur when you're using shaders or vibrant visuals. But as we can see from that right over there, vibrant visuals doesn't exist in Java Edition just yet, but I'm still able to see the end flashes. But while they occur in vanilla in Java, you have to be using vibrant visuals for it to happen in Bedrock. So, myth busted. End flashes change the light level. So if I were to go and remove my night vision, and we wait for another end flash to start up, while it does visually tint the whole end island, the truth is that if I were to go and look with my F3, it actually doesn't change the light level of any of these given blocks. So, myth busted. And another end flashes myth states that end flashes change based on the random tick. So, let's give it a random tick speed command observer. Okay, up to random tick speed 500, let's give it a shot. All right, we've got our 1. It's no faster. Let's try a tick sprint. Oh, there we go. So tick sprints impact it, but random tick does not. But considering that they have random lengths that can last between 5 and 19 seconds, it might give the illusion that random tick speed's what's happening, but that's not the case. So are you able to change the frequency of these end flashes? Yes, but not through random tick. So myth kinda busted. This one states that you can craft the new copper items that were seen in this update with the help of the stone cutter. Let's give it a shot. I got my copper items here. I go into my stone cutter. Well, I can't put the regular copper in there. And while I can put the block of copper, none of the new blocks are available to me. And in fact, the only way for me to get my copper trapdoors or anything else, my copper chains, I'm gonna have to go into the crafting table for this one. And I'm not exactly sure why. If you're gonna allow us to use the stone cutter for other copper items, why not just make that a broad thing? But I don't know. Myth busted. It's cheaper to craft copper chests by making a golem instead of by crafting them with the crafting table. Well, let's find out. So to craft up a copper golem, golem, it would cost 9 ingots and then a carved pumpkin, giving me both a friend and a copper chest. But just the copper chest itself would cost a chest and 8 ingots. So Observer killed off our copper golem, and that netted us back 3 ingots. So when we factor that in, if you kill off your copper golem friend, then it actually costs less copper ingots overall. So yes, it is cheaper. Myth confirmed. Copper chests have more storage than our regular chests. Well, here's my regular large chest. We got 54 slots compared to our copper chest, 54 slots. And I think this myth comes from the idea of a lot of mod packs back in the day used to have copper chests, and those would be bigger. So while the recipe is more expensive to go and make this, it doesn't give you any more storage. Myth busted. Because shelves are flammable, netherite items inside of a shelf will burn. Well, let's find out. Enable fire tick and get out my flint and steel or lava. What is going to happen to our netherite tools? Oh, looks like the shelf's getting on fire now, and it all pops out. So while the shelf will burn, the netherite tools will all stay safe. So, myth busted. This myth states that copper golems can build copper golems. Well, let's find out. If I get in my golem to start this up, he'll go into the copper chest, taking out the carved pumpkins, drop them off over here into our system, which funnels them into a dispenser, which activates that, building off more and more copper golems. And the whole reason that we have this command block here is just that it's replacing the copper block there to keep it simple. As long as you're pushing copper blocks into place, we can always build copper golems this way. This is all possible in vanilla in survival. Myth confirmed. Will zombies drop baked potatoes if you kill them with fire? Well, let's find out. It might take a few to kill. It's only a rare drop. And there we go. We see that when it drops a potato, it actually drops as a baked potato. This myth says that you need the proper tool to use enchantments. Well, let's see. I've got a silk touch shovel. Will that let me still get glass? Toggle my glass generator. And sure enough, even though the shovel isn't the right tool for breaking glass, in fact, there's no right tool for breaking glass, it'll always use silk touch regardless of what I break. And in fact, even if we had silk touch applied on a block that can't normally have silk touch, because, I mean, it's a block, it'll still work even with our silk touch dirt. Just don't place it down, then it just becomes dirt. Stone axes are a worse weapon than diamond axes. Well, let's find out. I've got my iron here, my stone, and my diamond, which, if you look at the attack damage, each one of these does 9 attack damage. It's all the same. The only difference is that every increasing axe will do an extra attack speed, meaning that even though the damage is exactly the same, if you want to attack a little bit faster, it does behoove you to craft the next one up. So I'm gonna give this one a kind of. This myth says that wheat crops will drop more wheat if you use fortune tools to harvest them. Even though I'm getting a lot more seeds, it'll actually have no difference on the amount of wheat that I get. And the reason this myth might exist is that if I was breaking down carrots or potatoes, they don't have a seed outside of the item itself, so it's still a good idea to use your fortune tool, but maybe not as good of an idea for this one. This myth says that it's pointless to drink honey when you have full hunger bar. And sure enough, there is actually a point to drinking honey when you have a full hunger bar. And the reason for that is that if I was to get poison, if you wouldn't mind, Observer, thank you. If I drink this honey, then it works as something of a milk bucket only for poison, giving me an easy and stackable way to go and save myself from poisoning. And the other reason that you would drink it up is that you could increase your saturation, the secret hunger bar, even if your actual hunger haunches are full. This next myth says that you can only apply honeycomb to copper when it's actually placed as a block in the world, which, as we'll find out, if I took down my copper, sure enough, it does work that way, but it also works if I were to take this stack of block of copper and this stack of honeycomb, put it in my inventory, and I get a full stack of waxed blocks of copper. So it's an easy way to go and patch in a few gaps if you place down blocks before, but otherwise, it's just so much quicker to do it in your crafting inventory. This myth says that crossbows do less damage than bows. Well, let's find out. Now, if I were to take an unenchanted bow against an unenchanted crossbow, then it's worth noting that an unenchanted crossbow shot will always do more damage than a fully charged bow shot. But if we were to enchant both of them up, then our power 5 bow will do more damage than our regular enchanted crossbow. But don't throw away your crossbow just yet, because if you were to fill this up using firework rockets and multi-shot, it could actually go past armor. So depending on the situation, you're going to be either better off using your unenchanted crossbow or your regular enchanted bow. Crossbows can bypass shields. Well, let's find out. Observer, if you wouldn't mind doing the honors. If I stand here with my shield up, sure enough, Observer's able to damage me through the shield without even triggering it to go down, because the piercing piercing enchantment makes it go through the shield. Alright, this myth says that if you have Soak Touch on your shovel, it's going to prevent the gravel from ever dropping flint. And sure enough, no matter how much gravel I break at this gravel generator, it's never going to drop a single piece of flint because of that Soak Touch enchantment. This myth says that Eyes of Ender will always lead you directly to the end portal. Well, let's see. Take my Eye of Ender and I throw it. It'll in fact always lead me to the stronghold, but not directly to the end portal, because they're only programmed to take you to this staircase, giving you the entrance room of the stronghold. And even if we go underneath and start throwing them, they're going to want to lead us up to that room. This myth says that golden carrots are the highest stat food to eat in the game, which is probably backed up by the fact that you see most players eating this when they're in the late stages of the game. But while a golden carrot restores 6 hunger points and has 14.4 saturation, a rabbit stew is able to fill up 10 hunger points, though it'll be slightly less saturation at only 12 points. Meaning that overall, if you just have one food to eat, rabbit stew isn't a bad choice. But it's not stackable, and really, the dark secret about rabbit stew is that if you eat all the ingredients that go into a rabbit stew separately, you would just get more hunger that way. This myth says that rotten flesh is the worst food in the game. Let's find out. Well, the way that we're going to decide this is by adding together hunger restored and saturation restored to get what the wiki calls food quality. And if you look at it by that, then you'll see that rotten flesh is actually above all of the raw meats in the game, melon slices, and even slices of cake. And by this metric, the lowest thing in the game would be the pufferfish and the tropical fish, each standing at 1 hunger point restored and 0.2 saturation points. Which the pufferfish is particularly brutal because once you eat it up, all of that poison is basically going to remove any of the benefits you'd get anyway. And this also applies hunger, making it by far the worst thing in the game. Logs are a better fuel source than planks. Let's find that out. Because if I were to go and try to smelt up all of these logs using 1 log versus all of these logs using 1 plank, then we'll see that both sources are only able to cook up 1.5 items. So obviously the benefit there is that you could just go and craft down your logs into 4 planks, giving you enough fuel source for 6 items. Or you could benefit the most by just taking all of that and cooking it down into charcoal, giving you a way to cook up 8 items with 1 singular fuel source. This myth says that kelp blocks can smelt 20 items. Well, that would make them one of the best fuel sources in the game, so let's test that out. If I were to cook up this kelp and then take the 9 dried kelp and put it into a dried kelp block, then if I were to go and cook down my kelp this way, we'll see that sure enough, the kelp block does smelt 20, but let's take it in perspective, because to get there, we had to cook up 9 items first, giving us an overall result of 11 smelting power, which is still less than blaze rods at 12, but it's more than other things like coal at 8. So is it better than blaze rods? No. Can it smelt 20 items? I'm gonna give this one a kind of. Resin is only obtainable from encountering the creaking in the Pale Garden. And while that's definitely the most intended way to go and get our resin, it's not the only way. Because if we were to go inside of the Woodland Mansion loot, you'll find that it actually does generate inside of our Woodland Mansion chests. Meaning that if you were to get enough resin just by going across the different Woodland Mansions, then technically you could make your own creaking heart and never have to actually go inside of a pale forest, getting you the pale oak logs and the creaking heart to actually summon in your own creaking and make yourself a resin farm. This one says that you can use the fortune enchantment to get more books from villager bookshelves. Well, let's find out. If I take my fortune 3 axe and I go against these villager bookshelves, in fact, it's always going to drop 3 books regardless of any kind of fortune enchantment, which makes sense. Otherwise, you'd have an infinite loot, considering that you could craft a bookshelf, break it with fortune for book profit, and then sell it back to different kinds of villagers to get yourself even more bookshelves and creating the cycle anew. This myth says that the warden drops no loot. Well, it's not a mob that you're supposed to be going around killing, but if I were to go and slay it like so, it does in fact drop a skulk catalyst, which we could in fact use to get ourselves more skulk if we had enough XP dropping on top of it with something like a mob grinder. So it's usable, but it's not exactly the most practical reward. As Mojang originally showed off, snowballs were the way to distract the warden. So let's see, are snowballs still the best way to distract the warden? Well, the truth is that any kind of projectile that we use is going to have the same chance of distracting the warden. Whether it's snowballs, a crossbow with arrows, or even eggs, it all stands the same chance. Even if the loot inside of the ancient cities might lead you to believe otherwise, myth busted. This myth says that using silk touch to break gold ore in the nether will keep the piglins from getting mad at you. And sure enough, that's not going to be the case, except for the fact that the piglin might go and get distracted trying to barter with it. It's not actually any less mad at me, it just likes the gold. And the only way to keep yourself safe would be just not mining it next to a piglin regardless. Even if I'm wearing a gold hat, no difference. Just don't steal their stuff. Having a bulk amount of flint is completely useless. Since while you're probably not going to be going and crafting up a bunch of arrows because you could just trade for them with the Fletcher, the truth is that with that that same Fletcher, we could trade down our flint into getting emeralds that allow us to buy more arrows, meaning that we basically skip the whole step of ever needing a chicken, which I'm sure the chickens appreciate more too. This myth says that we can't enchant items such as the carrot on a stick, shears, or the flint and steel, because obviously any of these that I put inside of the enchantment table, we're not going to get anything. But if I were to take something like Unbreaking 3 and go into an anvil here, sure enough, I can attach it even in survival onto things like the carrot of a stick, the shears, or the flint and steel. And all of these can be enchanted with mending too, which gives you the really funny idea of the carrot regrowing on top of the stick. But hey, I guess it's enchanted for a reason, and the reason was to bust that myth. Myth busted. This myth says that sharpness is an exclusive enchantment to our swords. Well, if I go into survival here, we'll see that of course I can add the sharpness 5 book on my sword, but if I swap in my diamond axe, even though I can't get it through the enchantment table, I can still get it with an enchanted book like so. And the benefit of all this is that if we were to take a netherite axe and then add sharpness 5 on top of it, that'll take its damage all the way up to 18 damage with an axe crit. This myth says that wind charges are the same as a breeze's projectile. Well, if we have a breeze here, will it trigger redstone the same way that a wind charge would? Well, it's able to flip down our certain trapdoors and gates, but as a matter of fact, our wind charge projectiles that we throw out have an added 10% knockback. This myth says that the mace can do as much damage as a falling anvil. Well, let's see if I climb up the scaffolding here. Then down there we have our dummy. That's a husk with 50 health. And if I were to drop in an anvil like so, which as you can very clearly see, regardless of how much damage that anvil did, I did a lot more with my mace. And one of the big reasons for that is that our anvils can actually cap out at damage, doing a max of 40 HP. And one of the big reasons for that is that the mace is able to scale its damage infinitely. So after the first 3 blocks that we fall, our mace is going to do 2 hearts of damage. Then the next 5 blocks that we fall are going to scale it up another heart. And then every extra block that we fall after that is going to give it an extra half a heart damage. Meaning that once we've fallen this far, we're doing a whole bunch of damage even without having enchanted our mace, whereas the anvil only caps out at 40 HP. This myth says that we're able to get the advancement for planting down any kind of seed as opposed to just our regular seeds for getting the farming advancement. Which if I place down my carrots, potatoes, I don't get the advancement, but placing down a kind of seed, whether that's torchflower seeds, wheat seeds, or pitcher pods, those will all work for a seedy place. Which is a bit confusing because the pitcher pod doesn't even have seeds in the name, so I don't know why it wouldn't apply for the rest of our options. But anyway, myth busted. This myth says that chainmail armor is fully unobtainable, which we'll soon find out just isn't the case. There's a chance that we could trade with armorer villagers to get chainmail. We can go and find it inside of loot chests like so, inside of woodland mansions, or through combat armor drops that we're seeing with mob spawners. This myth says that if I was to have a piercing and flame enchanted crossbow, then if I shoot it through this TNT here, it'll ignite all of them, which as you can unfortunately see, it'll collide with a block before it would go through any of them as entities. As cool as this would be, it is impossible. Now, when you see something called flight duration 3, you're probably expecting it to have 3 times the flight duration of a flight duration 1. Well, let's test that. If I take this and then try my flight duration 1, you'll see that a flight duration 1 rocket gives you a flight duration of 1.17 seconds, and a flight duration 2 gives us 1.48 seconds, and a flight duration 3 gives us the overall of 2.22 seconds. So even though you're using 3 times the amount of gunpowder to get this, it's closer to about 2 times the flight effectiveness. So unless you have a surplus of gunpowder, it's probably just better off just crafting more of the flight duration 1s if you can. This myth says that if you were to wear Frostwalker 2 boots, then you'll keep yourself safe from any kind of magma blocks or campfire damage, which as we can see, if I go and step on top of this campfire, I can put on my Frostwalker boots and I'm completely fine. I'm not even sneaking and I'm completely fine on the magma blocks too. This myth says that we can store potions inside of a cauldron like we can on Bedrock, and unfortunately, it's not possible. The only way that we're storing potions inside of cauldrons is just by throwing the item inside of the block, and it's unfortunate that we don't have parity for this way. So this myth says that plants are the best item to compost in the composter. I mean, it would make sense, it is the composter, but the truth is that the best chance you have of raising the compost level is by using something like pumpkin pie or cake, because that always has a 100% chance of increasing the compost level. Even then though, it still takes so much pumpkin pie just to get 1 bone meal. I mean that even if you know the best way to use the composter, it's still not always a very practical block. This myth says that apples will only drop from oak trees, which if I go and break these leaves, we'll eventually see that it's not just our regular oak trees that can give us apples, but in fact, they're able to drop from dark oak leaves as well, as we see right there. But just when you think think that it would be all kinds of oak trees that would drop this, the truth is that even if I plant out a pale oak sapling, they will never actually drop any kind of apples. So it's false either way. Myth busted. This myth says that we can brush a baby turtle to get scute, which unfortunately, no matter how much I'm right-clicking, we actually never get any scute from our baby turtles. It's only something that's for armadillos. And the only way to get scute is if our baby turtle grows up and drops it once it becomes an adult. This myth says that you can't uncraft quartz blocks back into quartz, which if I take my nether quartz like so, I can craft it up into a block of quartz, but I can't get it back. And the whole reason this happens this way is because otherwise you'd be able to buy quartz blocks from the stonemasons and then get the full item that way. Which means that we could completely bypass the nether if we were able to do it this way to get our things like observers and comparators. Which unfortunately, Mojang doesn't want. Which is why this myth's confirmed. This myth says that we can use a splash water bottle to extinguish our campfires. That's completely true. This myth says that a villager will drop its held items on death. Well, let's see. We've got a villager there with armor equipped on it through this dispenser. And even though we can't see it, it will take longer to kill the villager with that netherite chest plate, and sure enough, it does drop that netherite chest plate. But if I was to take a villager here and give it a whole bunch of foodstuffs to go into its secret inventory, then even though it's able to give it to another villager through trading, if I kill off this villager, it won't drop any of the bread that I gave it. So this one's gonna get a partial confirm. It works for armor, doesn't work for any kind of other items. This myth says that the only reason why maps don't work in the nether is because of the bedrock ceiling, which let's find out. If I were to take a map and fly up to the ceiling, can I then create a new map up here and see? Well, sure enough, even if I were to place down a whole bunch of this black stone here, we're never actually going to see it on the map because it's fully intentional that our maps will never work in the nether, very similar to how compasses don't work without a lodestone. So this observer face doesn't work, and that's how I feel about it. Nether stars are completely immune to fire and lava, just like netherite. Well, if I take my nether star and I throw it in there, unfortunately, I'm not getting it back. Because while nether stars are blast resistant, they're not resistant to everything else the same way that they would be in Bedrock Edition. This myth says that lapis is a non-renewable resource, which as we'll find out when I get the hero of the village and I go and interact with the cleric villagers, then occasionally they are able to throw out lapis lazuli as an item. So while it is hard to get, it's not impossible to get a renewable source of lapis. There we go. And now I've got myself my lapis. It's only 2 pieces, but it is renewable. This myth says that we can use harnesses to lead our happy ghasts. So we've got our happy ghast, it starts flying away, but if I were to hold down a harness, it will actually come to me, which is pretty useful. You don't have to wrangle them in to be able to ride them. This myth says that banner patterns are consumed on use the same way that armor trims are. Well, let's see. If I take my banner here, take my field masoned banner pattern, and I apply it like so, I still have my banner pattern even after dyeing my banner, which is good considering that the thing banner pattern takes a whole enchanted golden apple to be able to use it. This myth says that using bone blocks on wolves will instantly tame them. Well, unfortunately, as cool as that would be, it doesn't work. You can't use any kind of bone blocks onto our wolves, and it's just the regular bones that do the trick. And similarly for our wolves, this myth says that any food item will heal up our wolves the exact same way. Well, let's see. If I tame up my wolf like so, then if I were to feed it things like puffer fish and tropical fish, that'll only heal up 2 HP for our wolf. And luckily, it doesn't give it the poison effect, but the highest amount of HP that we can restore for our wolves is by using rabbit stew to give it 20 full HP. This myth says that copper ingots can heal up our copper golems the same way that iron ingots can heal up our iron golems. Well, let's see. If I were to harm this copper golem and then right-click it with copper ingots, it has no interaction on the copper golem. So the only way to increase its health would be using something like an instant healing potion. This myth says that if a mob is holding the Totem of Undying, it's able to use it. Well, we can definitely see that the husk is holding it, and if I kill it off, it uses that Totem of Undying. But what about the blaze? Well, sure enough, even if you can't see the mob actually holding onto it, it will still use the Totem of Undying. This myth says that diamonds are completely unrenewable. Well, the truth is that thanks to our vaults that we see down in the trial chambers, they only have a memory of 128 players, meaning that if you had 128 friends, then when you go up to it on the 129th time, it is possible to get even more diamonds from the same trial vault. So that's the way that we get the raw diamonds, and then if we want just the diamond tools and armor, we can trade for those with villagers. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, all right?